Hogwarts, Treasure Hunting with the Eye of God, Episode 61, The King's Treasure and the Dung Monster. Forget it, in that case, let's try to see if I can collect this one as well. He took out the crown and silently called the system. Ding. Congratulations to the host for collecting the White King's crown and getting the reward, Intelligent Core Technology. Next, there was another round of memory infusion. Although it was just a crown reward, Ting felt that the knowledge he gained this time was even larger and more complex than the wisdom of Bossuet just now. After finally finishing the infusion, Yida was about to overload his brain. Although it was just a technology to make an intelligent core, Ting could immediately conclude that it was more precious than the clockwork technology just now. If clockwork technology comes from the wisdom of people, then intelligent core technology comes from the wisdom of gods, because the core made by this method can give real life to the machine. Several intelligent puppets on the continent of Teyvat all come from this technology, such as General Thunder, a Wanderer, and the puppet sword Ghost. However, this technology is too complicated, even Ting can't do it. Ting, I can't figure it out for a while. Even if I figured it out, it would be quite difficult to create a real intelligent core. Well, let's keep it in my mind as a technical reserve for now. Finally, there are Snape's poison and antidote. The rewards for these two are much more normal. The former allows Ting to obtain the immune trait, which comes from the Pokemon world. Pokemon with this trait will not fall into poisoned or highly poisoned states. The former allows Ting to obtain the heat resistance trait, which is another ability from the Pokemon world. The damage caused by fire attribute moves and burns to Pokemon with this trait is reduced to half of the original. They are all very practical abilities. At least Ting doesn't have to worry about being poisoned, and has more self-protection ability when encountering fire spells. By the way, even Snape's Nettle Wine triggered the collection reward, and Ting obtained the Sea-Dew flower tea recipe. When Ting used the system to recycle medicines, he obtained a lot of Sea-Dew flowers, which can be used to make Sea-Dew flower tea. According to the system description, this tea can quickly restore people's energy, and the effect is even better than the best energy potion. However, Ting himself will not use it easily. Maybe his cat will like to drink it? After sorting out the harvest, Ting collected the chess pieces, and then potted several devil's snare seedlings, and took them back to the dormitory with the mysterious flower buds 11, and placed them on the balcony. Then, he fell asleep. Tomorrow he has to go to the corridor on the 4th floor to collect all the keys, and then it will be perfect. Harry Potter, the boy who survived the catastrophe, and his best friend Weasley were caught on a night tour last night. Early the next morning, this matter spread all over Hogwarts. However, Ting and Zhang Qiu deducted 10 points from Ravenclaw, Hermione and Susan deducted 5 points from Gryffindor and Hufflepuff, respectively. Such a thing was completely ruined and no one even noticed it. It can only be said that the same person has different fates. It is the same night out, but being discovered by Headmaster Dumbledore or by Filch and Snape is completely different. Under the threat of Professor Snape, Gryffindor's house points were barely maintained, but they were almost deducted overnight. The hourglass recording the points is now empty and painful. It has only been 2 weeks since the start of school, and Harry and Ron have been deducted a full 100 points for night outings. They instantly became the laughingstock of everyone, especially Harry. His reputation plummeted overnight, and the legend of surviving a disaster became an arrogant violator. As for Ron, on weekdays, he seems a little unknown under Harry's halo, which makes him a little distressed. But in this incident, the benefits of being unknown were reflected. Everyone just regarded him as an insignificant accomplice, and only stared at Harry without blaming him. On the contrary, his twin brothers Fred and George were very upset about him. They were old hands at night wandering, and they were always unnoticed and had never been caught. They didn't expect that their little brother would be so unlucky in his first attempt and fell directly into the hands of Filch and Snape. Malfoy was the happiest. He stood at the Slytherin table and talked endlessly about the embarrassing situation of Harry and Weasley being caught, as if he had arrested them personally. The scratches on his face from Mrs. Norris seemed to have become his medals. Pansy saw it and felt pain in her heart. Now, she completely dispelled the suspicion that Malfoy had an affair with his followers, and even asked for ointment from the school hospital to wipe his scars. However, Malfoy's pride did not last long. Peeves, the big mouth, soon broke the news that he had witnessed Malfoy and Potter kissing passionately that night. As soon as the news came out, the whole school exploded. Faced with this sudden accusation, the two parties chose to remain silent and did not come forward to clarify. This tacit attitude made the students more convinced that what Peeves said was true. Potter went out at night to meet Malfoy privately. This news was more explosive than any gossip in the wizarding world. Pansy was furious when she heard the news. She threw the potion into the trash can in a rage. It was the weekend, and without the worries of schoolwork, the little wizards were happy to discuss these gossips for fun, but Ting just thought they were noisy. After distributing the potted plants of the devil's snare seedlings to several accomplices, Ting went upstairs alone and secretly returned to the abandoned corridor. He planned to take this opportunity to collect all the keys from yesterday. After opening the corridor door, the three-headed dog Fluffy immediately rushed out to perform its duties. The big dog was about to grin at the person who came, but who knew that the person who came was one of the evil stars from last night? The one lying on the boy's shoulder was the terrible cat from last night, wasn't it? Since being arranged by Hagrid to be a guard here, last night was the first time he was beaten so badly. At first, Lu Wei wanted to show off his power and save face for his embarrassing performance last night, but when Lynette meowed, its three heads immediately fell to the ground, making a flattering sound. Lynette came to Lu Wei with a proud look on her face, and even symbolically stepped on the dog's head in the middle of Lu Wei. Lu Wei lay on the ground the whole time, not daring to move. Seeing this scene, Yi Ting was sure that his pet and his little brother had +1. Lynette was worthy of it. In this way, Lu Wei naturally did not dare to embarrass Yi Ting anymore, and obediently gave up the trapdoor. This time, there was no soft devil's net under the trapdoor. In order to avoid falling, Yi Ting simply opened the wind wings during the fall. This was Yi Ting's first time to experience the wind wings in person. How to say it? Except that it cannot actively provide lift, it is quite flexible to control and looks very cool. It is worthy of being a popular gliding prop in Teyvat. Halfway through the journey, Yi Ting noticed that Hermione's inscription on the wall of the corridor had disappeared. Has anyone been here since we left? He immediately understood something. It was probably Dumbledore who did it. Thinking carefully, Dumbledore is still a good person to deal with. Originally, Yi Ting was worried that Dumbledore liked to favor the savior. After all, in the original book, he said, Slytherin obviously won the college cup, but at the banquet before the holiday, he gave Gryffindor extra points and overtook them again. Such nonsense. And the reason for the extra points was that the three saviors broke into the abandoned corridor checkpoints, and this was something he had clearly prohibited when school started. It would be strange if he was not partial to someone who could do such a thing, that slapped himself in the face. But what happened last night changed Yi Ting's attitude towards Dumbledore. Dumbledore does have many shortcomings, such as stubbornness, self-righteousness, and he is indeed partial to Harry Potter. But in the matter of breaking into the abandoned corridor, he does not have too many double standards. Yi Ting and his friends took bribes and were caught on the spot, but they were only deducted 5 points each. They didn't even think about getting back the things they stole. It was as if they really regarded those devil's snares and chess pieces as prizes for Yi Ting and his friends. From this point, we can see that Dumbledore's attitude has always been the same. That is, he hopes that students can be more active and encourages students to break the rules, even if they slightly violate some school rules. It doesn't matter as long as they don't make mistakes of principle. How to say it, this attitude may seem heretical to some people, but it also has its own logic. People who follow the rules may not adapt too well, but it is easy to cultivate geniuses, partial talents, and eccentrics. If it were in the previous life, Yi Ting would definitely not support this way of education. As the head of a school, Dumbledore did this and didn't take the majority of ordinary people seriously. But now? Yi Ting is the most indulged genius. The vested interest is actually me? That's fine. If the power is increased, it will be even better. After gliding to the ground, Yi Ting walked forward and soon came to the key hut. The winged keys were still lying on the ground, motionless, and only a few were flying in the air. It seems that the power of Rose Lightning is still too strong. Even though he had tried his best to restrain the power, the thunder of the rose which still destroyed the magic structure inside the keys, giving these keys a devastating blow. This won't work, Yi Ting muttered to himself. It's like the disappearing cabinet must be repaired before choosing to collect it in order to get the complete reward. If these keys are in a damaged state, it may also affect the rewards that Yi Ting can get. Thinking of this, Yi Ting suddenly felt that he shouldn't have pretended to be so cool last night. It was cool to show off Rose Lightning in front of the girl, and he also received admiring and worshipful eyes as he wished. It's a pity that pretending to be cool is only cool for a while, but it will end up in the crematorium. Now it's time to pay for your pretense. Next, Yi Ting stayed here for the whole morning, taking back the remaining magic power of the rose witch in the key, and then used the repair spell to restore the keys to their original state one by one. Among them, recovering magic power is a necessary process. The reason why the repair spell and various healing spells cannot repair the damage caused by black magic is that the residual magic power and curse of black magic will remain in the wound, preventing the damage from being repaired. In short, the whole process was extremely cumbersome, and Yi Ting even missed lunch for this. In the end, he finally repaired the last key before 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Perhaps because of Yi Ting's magic power flowing inside, these keys that Yi Ting repaired personally also lost their hostility towards him, or in other words, they no longer regarded Yi Ting as a challenger of the level, but as a level builder like Professor Flitwick. Yi Ting waved his hand, and the keys gathered in front of Yi Ting, waiting for his instructions. Yi Ting counted them and found that there were only 1,023 keys in total. What kind of strange number is this? It's not an integer. Bad review. Yi Ting felt that he was suffering from obsessive-compulsive disorder. He thought for a while and took out the silver door key he had taken yesterday from his hat and added it to the list. Well, the number was restored to an integer, and Yi Ting felt relieved. At this point, Yi Ting officially launched Collection. As the light flashed, the collection ceremony was officially completed. The system prompt sounded at the right time. Ding! Congratulations to the host for collecting Professor Flitwick's flying key X1024. And received the reward of the King's Treasure. The King's Treasure, Gate_of_Babylon, is a treasure owned by Gilgamesh in the Type Moon world. The key-shaped sword that leads to the Golden City. It is connected to the space of the treasure house and can freely take out the props in it. Gilgamesh will use the King's Treasure to shoot out the prototypes of all treasures like bullets to fight. After using the treasure that was shot out, it will soon return to Gilgamesh's treasure house. Immediately afterwards, a golden key sword with complex patterns on it fell into Yi Ting's hands. Just seeing this reward, Yi Ting was still very happy, but when he held the key to the King's Treasure, that is, the King's Law key, he was immediately disappointed. It is true that Yi Ting obtained the treasure, King's Treasure, but it is only King's Treasure. In other words, there is only an empty treasury, and Yi Ting has to fill the treasures inside by himself. It's okay, at least it can be used as a warehouse. But Yi Ting's own space pocket is already big enough, and the capacity of King's Treasure can only be said to be icing on the cake. Maybe it will be useful in the future, Yi Ting thought, and put it away. Another advantage of the treasure is that they are conceptual weapons without entities, and there is no need to find a place to store them. As long as the thought flashes, they will automatically appear in the hand. Next, Yi Ting has to complete one more step, that is, to further add defensive measures for these keys. At least these keys are already his collection. Although Yi Ting intends to leave them here as a checkpoint for Professor Dumbledore, this does not mean that he cannot take some measures to protect his property. Yi Ting first cast a copy spell on each key. In this way, once someone tries to capture these keys, the keys will start to split automatically. Originally, 1024 keys were enough. Once the copy spell was triggered, 1 would become 2, 2 would become 4, and then split continuously, up to 8,192 keys. What's more, for the key silver key, Yi Ting made some small modifications when casting the copy spell, to ensure that the teeth of each copied key are slightly different, ensuring that only the original can open the door. At this point, Yi Ting was not satisfied. Yi Ting thought about it, and took out a large number of floating dry cores and floating ghost cores from his inventory. These were all from the Teyvat alchemical materials he obtained when collecting abandoned medicinal materials, and the quantity was quite large. Especially the floating ghost cores, there were thousands of them. Yi Ting enchanted them one by one on the key. As we all know, the floating ghost core is a kind of floating energy core unique to Teyvat. After being enchanted on the key will have some of the abilities of the floating spirit. The floating spirit is the most annoying creature. Although it is a floating creature, it is difficult to be affected by the wind element. Although it is an elemental creature, it does not have its own elements and cannot directly produce elemental reactions like slimes. But as an elemental creature, they are immune to the corresponding elements. The most disgusting thing is that this creature will explode when it dies. In the previous life, it was once revered as a version of the dung monster. And now, Yi Ting is ready to let more people taste the power of the dung monster. Episode 62, Dumbledore's Test. After getting all the keys, it was almost evening. Yi Ting was ready to go back for dinner. Before leaving, he looked through the empty door and took a look at the chess hall. There was only an empty chessboard. Yi Ting suddenly felt that it was a bit too much for him to take all the props here as prizes. After all, Dumbledore arranged the levels to stop Voldemort and re-examine Harry Potter. If he took the props, he would have to trouble Professor McGonagall and others to rearrange them. Thinking of this, he slapped his thigh. It's decided. When I develop a magic-based mechanical puppet, I will make a batch of them and put them here as chess pieces, just to test their power. However, Professor McGonagall's transfiguration is not bad, but her chess skills are too poor. Anyone can beat the White King, which is not acceptable. He plans to focus on strengthening the White King's chess AI at that time. Yi Ting remembered that in 5 or 6 years, a super chess computer named Deep Blue would appear and defeat the world's #1 chess player at that time, Garry Kasparov, and usher in the era of AI chess. After all, IBM has started researching this now. Maybe I can go to the United States to refer to it when I have time. Well, I did this entirely to make up for the mistakes I made before, not to take the opportunity to pit the latecomers. In addition, I can also find a way to make up for the devil's snare that was taken away before. Anyway, with that strange flower bud, as long as there is enough nutrition, he can have as many devil's snares as he wants. While thinking, Yi Ting climbed up from the trapdoor and left the abandoned corridor. Suddenly, Yi Ting felt a breath approaching, and then a pair of hands gently patted his shoulders. He turned his head suddenly, and saw Dumbledore appeared behind him at some point, looking at him with a smile. "Kid, why are you here?" Yi Ting's heart skipped a beat, and he secretly said that it was not good. He froze in place, and his mind quickly thought about how to deal with it. He wanted to make up a random excuse, such as he just didn't walk here, but this excuse was obviously too far-fetched. After all, he was caught for breaking into the restricted area yesterday. Who would continue to walk here the next day? Just as the boy was thinking hard, Lynette's tail suddenly floated across his neck, which immediately gave him inspiration. Professor Dumbledore, I actually came here with Lynette. She wanted to come and see the new friend she made last night. As he said, he patted the kitten lying on his shoulder. Lynette, it's up to you. Lynette understood, meowed obediently, then jumped off Ting's shoulder and walked straight to the three-headed dog Fluffy. Fluffy was startled, thinking that he had done something to offend this evil star again, and that he had made a mistake again, so he immediately became submissive and respectful. This doesn't look like a friend at all. Ting felt even more embarrassed. He was about to remind Lynette to correct Fluffy's attitude. Unexpectedly, Dumbledore said approvingly, "It seems that your pet is as popular on this campus as you are." Ting nodded repeatedly, yes, my Lynette is not good at all, but she loves to make friends. For example, Fluffy, Mrs. Norris of Filch, and my roommate's pet are all Lynette's friends. I was worried that a child like you who has lived alone for a long time would not be able to adapt to the lively campus life. The old man smiled kindly. Seeing you like this, I feel relieved. Then he said, if you have time, why not accompany me, an old man, for a walk? As soon as he finished speaking, without waiting for Ting's consent, he walked towards the trapdoor on his own. Ting had no choice but to pick up Lynette and followed him, and the two entered the trapdoor together. Well, now he has just left and is back in this level. Walking in the empty corridor, Dumbledore chatted. In fact, I am very happy that a child like you can make so many friends in school. Miss Zhangqiu from Ravenclaw, Miss Susan Bones from Hufflepuff, and Miss Hermione Granger from Gryffindor are all excellent little witches. Yes, Ting nodded, with a smile on his face. I am also honored that they like me, an orphan, and let me feel the warmth of home in this school. But I see that you seem to have some prejudice against Slytherin? Dumbledore suddenly pointed out, this is not good. A smart child like you should not be affected by certain rumors. Even in Slytherin, there are many friends worth making. Of course, I firmly believe this. Ting nodded. Speaking of Slytherin, Dumbledore was right. Ting did have some opinions about this college, but as Dumbledore said, he could also find a few friends worth making in this college. For example, Daphne Greengrass. Although this little girl once gave Malfoy key advice when Malfoy was looking for trouble with her, her appearance in the entire Slytherin was the most in line with Ting's friend standards. But when the words came to his lips, they turned into, in fact, Mr. Malfoy and I are good friends. Then he added in his heart, for the sake of friendship. Hearing this, Dumbledore looked at Ting unexpectedly, and the smile on his face deepened. In front of him was the wall where they had graffitied. Dumbledore smiled and looked at it. The Snape was here written by Ting himself, had not been erased. Ting was thick-skinned and pretended not to see it. Dumbledore seemed to remember Hermione's message last night, and casually said, what do you think about Miss Granger's complaint? My opinion? Ting was stunned, not understanding why Dumbledore talked about this without any reason. Yes, it's her opinions and suggestions on Hogwarts teaching. I saw that she mentioned in the letter that you also expressed dissatisfaction with the current teaching situation, and half of the professors in the entire Hogwarts are unqualified. Ting was stunned when he heard this. Hermione, you are cheating me. No wonder you never let me see the complaint letter, so you are waiting for me here. You are dead. Ting cursed in his heart, but his face remained calm. He cleared his throat and said, to be honest, I think our Hogwarts teaching team does have a lot of room for improvement. I have an idea. We can introduce a last-place elimination system to regularly assess the teaching and academic level of professors. Those professors who have already taken office must also be reviewed every year. If they fail the assessment, they will have to be put under some pressure. If they do not improve, they will have to leave within a year. For new teachers, we can learn from the Muggles and implement a 3+3 foot assessment system. That is, every 3 years, a contract period. If they are not promoted to professor after 2 terms, then we will not renew their contract. Also, paper output is also very important. Green pepper. I mean, if young teachers want to be promoted to professors, they must publish a few articles in top journals, right? We can't let them just sit here and do nothing. If we work hard like this for a few years, our school will definitely be able to take a big step up in the next education evaluation. Ting finished speaking, and smiled shyly. Professor, this is just a little idea of mine, what do you think? This suggestion is not small, it is more thoughtful than the entire Ministry of Magic combined. But he just nodded slightly and said gently, Ting, you can write down these ideas and send them to the Ministry of Education. Maybe they will adopt them. He pondered for a moment, and then added softly, in fact, Professor Snape and I have also been discussing some new plans recently, such as restarting activities that have been suspended for many years, such as the Magic School Potions Championship and the Triwizard Tournament. That's great, more communication can lead to progress. Yi Ting agreed. The two walked and talked, and unknowingly passed Professor Flitwick's level. Watching the keys flying back into the sky, Dumbledore's smile became even brighter. He seemed to mistakenly think that Yi Ting came back specifically to clean up the mess left last night, which deepened Yi Jian's image of a good boy in his mind. Yi Ting also realized this, but he said nothing and let Dumbledore misunderstand. Soon, the two finally passed the chessboard level and came to Snape's room. Seeing that the level was about to end, Yi Ting asked knowingly, "Professor, do you have anything special to do here?" Dumbledore did not directly answer, "I came to find Yi Ting," but just said calmly, "I'm here to give you a mirror." Mirror? Yi Ting curiously followed Dumbledore into the room. There was a large mirror in the room, which was the one that was placed in the principal's office before. There was a line of words engraved on the top of the mirror. Erised tuba, kaferwe tomwosi. Yi Ting saw at a glance that in order to decipher this spell, he needed to reverse it and separate it again, becoming I.show.hot-your-face_beauty-your-hearts.desire. It means I don't show your face, but the desire in your heart. Do you know the secret of this mirror? Dumbledore approached the mirror and asked mysteriously. Yi Ting nodded. This is the mirror of Erised, which is said to be able to reflect the deepest desires of a person. He smiled slightly. I've read about it in a book. Oh? What do you see in the mirror, kid? Dumbledore asked casually, but he didn't know that the little wizard in front of him was an out-and-out time traveler, and he knew the headmaster well before joining Hogwarts. At this time, Yi Ting had already keenly realized that this question was the real purpose of Dumbledore inviting him for a walk. Although Yi Ting was relieved when facing Snape, but in the face of Yi Ting's extraordinary talent, even Dumbledore still had some concerns. Therefore, he planned to use the mirror of Erised to test Yi Ting's true thoughts. Yi Ting was naturally aware of this. Of course, only he could see what was in the mirror of Erised. He could make up a bunch of lies. With his brain occlusion, Dumbledore couldn't read his thoughts at all, but there were still risks in doing so. With Dumbledore's keenness, he could at least tell whether Yi Ting was lying or not by concentrating his attention. But Yi Ting couldn't tell everything he saw. He couldn't tell Dumbledore that he saw himself unifying the wizarding world in the future and secretly controlling the Muggle world in the mirror, and then going a step further, opening up the gate to travel through the heavens and the worlds. Not to mention the unification of the world. In Dumbledore's eyes, it might be too dangerous. Of course, even if Dumbledore knew this, Yi Ting was not that worried, but the main problem was trouble. After all, it was not easy to explain just traveling through the heavens and the worlds. Yi Ting immediately had an idea. He continued to stare at the mirror, taking measures to deal with the Sorting Hat, trying to resonate with Lisa's Eye of God. Sure enough, the will in the Eye of God could deceive the Sorting Hat, and of course it could also deceive the mirror of Erised. What appeared in the mirror of Erised became a scene that combined Yi Ting's thoughts and the part of Lisa's will that matched Yi Ting's ideas. After a long while, he whispered, I saw a child who was concentrating on studying. This is absolutely honest. No matter how strong Dumbledore's, legislatives, is, there is no falsehood, because this is what Yi Cha saw. However, this is only the product of Lisa's will, and it is also part of the scene. He did not mention that the child who was reading was surrounded by all kinds of attractive girls. Hermione, Susan, Jean Chio, Penelope, and others were among them, and there was even a cat girl. Dumbledore looked at Yi Ting with a little surprise. He thought that this orphan boy would see a warm family, a lot of wealth, or absolute power, kings. Generally speaking, children born in the past would desire this. However, Yi Lu showed a serious expression. Professor, what I desire most in my heart is endless knowledge and the mystery of magic. You are a real Ravenclaw, child. Dumbledore was silent for a long time before he put his arm on the boy's shoulder, his voice warm and deep. Yi Ting, if you want to explore in the future, or go out for a night tour with your companions, remember to be careful and don't touch those dangerous places, understand? I'm sorry, Professor. Yi Ting put on a well-behaved look and said, I shouldn't take them to wander late at night, let alone go to forbidden places. Hey, there's no need to apologize. There's nothing wrong with occasional night tours. Who hasn't secretly wandered at night when they were young? The old man smiled and warned, however, not every little wizard is as capable as you, so if you get to a dangerous place, you have to protect your friends, understand? Yi Ting nodded. Also, Professor McGonagall was very angry when she knew you took Miss Granger out for a night tour. Dumbledore blinked. Of course, I didn't tell her, and I don't know who told her, maybe Professor Snape. Anyway, she is very angry now. You have to be careful recently and don't run into the gun. After Yi Ting left, Dumbledore stood alone in front of the mirror. The white-haired old man last night appeared in the mirror again, looking at him with a smile. I have high hopes for this orphan. Dumbledore said softly, he is like you and Tom, loves magic, is gifted, even more talented than you, so, I will guide him well. He closed his eyes and gently touched the mirror, as if stroking the face of the old man in the mirror. Bless me, Gellert, I will not let him become the second you, nor will I let him follow Tom's old path, I swear. Episode 63, Quidditch Tryouts. On the other side, after fooling Dumbledore, Ting quickly left the corridor and sighed softly. Through the experience of last night and today, Ting can be regarded as a true understanding of Dumbledore after leaving the original book. To be honest, this greatest white wizard is not as terrible as various conspiracy theories think. In addition to being a little too obsessed with prophecy, and sometimes being too fond of being a good person, overall, Ting still likes this principle very much. As a white wizard, Dumbledore is indeed practicing his philosophy in person, and in most cases, he is indeed tolerant and open-minded. In this regard, he is different from most victims of conspiracy theories, such as a certain strongest Hokage, but is quite similar to Lu Huangshu. After all, if a person pretends to be a gentleman all his life and never breaks his promise until his death, what difference does it make whether he is a pretend gentleman or a real gentleman? In short, Ting thinks that Dumbledore is not bad. The next day was Sunday. After breakfast, the Quidditch selection that the little wizards had been looking forward to finally kicked off. This selection is undoubtedly a grand event for all the little wizards who love flying and Quidditch. According to the regulations, only wizards in the 2nd grade and above can join the Quidditch team. However, this did not stop the enthusiasm of the little wizards. Many first-year kids ran to the side of the court and looked at the Quidditch players on the court with envy and admiration on their faces. Ting is an exception. Because of his amazing performance in the flying class, he was qualified to participate in the Ravenclaw substitute selection. Professor Flitwick is still an honest man. He is embarrassed to open a back door for his own college. Although he admired Ting's ability and quality and thought he deserved a starting position, he still adhered to his principles and only gave Ting a substitute qualification. Who would have thought that McGonagall's classroom would be even more crazy and directly arrange Harry to take the most important position of Seeker, and even exempted him from the selection. On the day of the selection, the 4 colleges could only use the venue in turn. After all, Hogwarts only had one Quidditch field. Ravenclaw selection time started at 10 a.m. Ting was a little late. When he arrived, Ravenclaw's Quidditch selection had already started for a while. Ting found Hermione and Susan in the audience, sat next to them in 603, and watched the selection with them. But as he watched, Ting's head nodded little by little, as if he was praising the players for their excellent performance. Ting, you are exaggerating, aren't you? Susan glanced at him and teased, did you sneak out alone for a night stroll last night? Hermione was sitting next to him writing a complaint letter. When she heard this, she immediately put down her feather pen and stared at him with sharp eyes. Ahaha, don't joke. Ting waved his hands quickly and lied innocently. I was too excited about the Quidditch selection today and didn't sleep well. Ting was indeed too excited last night, but not for the Quidditch selection, but for studying clockwork machinery. Yesterday he stayed in the room of requirement to study this. The research progress of using magic to replace Monghuang energy is much smoother than he imagined. According to Ting's estimate, he can complete the preliminary design of the magic power core in about a week, and then he can enter the verification phase. But that's why he was busy until late, and he didn't return to the dormitory until almost 4 or 5 in the morning. After being teased by Susan, Ting could only cheer up. He thought about it, took off his hat in order to match his sporty style. He wore a baseball cap today and then took out a thermos cup and drank a sip. He didn't want to do this at first, but in order to keep a good spirit, he could only endure it now. Sure enough, as the liquid flowed into his stomach through his tongue, Ting felt a strong taste impact, like the thick fallen leaves in the ancient wood swept through his mouth under the wind, deeply penetrated into his taste buds, and drowned it with endless bitterness. Suddenly, his handsome face wrinkled into a ball, but followed by a feeling of continuous energy surging up. The sleepiness just now was swept away by the bitter wave, and the whole person seemed to come alive. It is worthy of being the sea dew flower tea specially formulated by Sigwin. It is really bitter, but the refreshing effect is also really good. Alas, people still have to endure the hardships of life occasionally. Having said so, Ting no longer dared to take a second sip and put the tea aside. Lynette was attracted by the taste of the tea, and took a sip, then meowed curiously, thinking that Yi Jian's big reaction was strange. BBDD, if you like to drink, drink a few more sips. Should I say that she is worthy of being Lynette? Ting shook his head and turned his eyes to the lively stadium. At this moment, Ravenclaw College is selecting seekers, which is the most critical position in Quidditch. In Ravenclaw College, the number of witches accounts for the majority. Therefore, although most of the participants in Quidditch are men, compared with other colleges, there should be more young wizards participating in the selection in Ravenclaw. This is even more true for the selection of seekers. After all, seekers are not only the most important position in a team, but also not as rough as batsmen, and do not need to fight against each other like chasers and goalkeepers. In short, this position is both glamorous and respectable, and naturally became the first choice for witches who like Quidditch. There are more than 10 witches who have passed the initial screening and entered the formal selection. The selection method of the seeker is very direct. To put it bluntly, whoever can catch the golden snitch wins. On the field, more than a dozen Ravenclaw witches rode on flying brooms and staged a speed and passion in the air, with only the golden snitch as their goal. But not long after, a figure stood out like a meteor. Ting looked up and saw that it was Zhang Qiu. She was riding a Nimbus 1700, speeding on the field, leaving other players behind so much that they couldn't even catch her exhaust, and she almost became the most beautiful girl in the entire field. To be honest, Zhang Qiu gave people the impression of being as gentle as water and full of ladylike style. Who would have thought that she would have such a strong interest in adventure, challenge, and sports? During the night tour 2 days ago, Ting saw this side of her for the first time. At this moment, she showed this love even more vividly. She sat steadily on the broom, the wind whistled past, her black hair was blown wildly, and she looked even more heroic. Students from several colleges who came to watch the excitement stared at Zhang Qiu intently at this time, and Yi Shushu saw Harry among them. He looked up and stared at her infatuatedly, completely attracted by Zhang Qiu's demeanor, and even regretted in his heart why he was not assigned to Ravenclaw. Cedric Diggory, the Seeker of Hufflepuff, stared at her intently, as if the whole world was left with only Zhang Qiu's figure. At this moment, Zhang Qiu undoubtedly became the goddess in everyone's heart. There may be 1 or 2 girls in Hogwarts who can match her in appearance, but I am afraid that there is really no second one like Zhang Qiu who can ride a broom in the sky. This is Zhang Qiu's greatest charm. Beside Ting, Hermione and Susan cheered for Zhang Qiu enthusiastically. The shared experience of night tour made the relationship between the 3 girls closer. Ting noticed that Hermione and Susan actually pulled up a striking banner with a soaring eagle painted on it, and Zhang Qiu's name was written next to it, which looked very impressive. Suddenly, Zhang Qiu accelerated suddenly, and her figure lightly drew an elegant arc in the air, followed by a sharp turn, and steadily caught the golden snitch. The whole audience burst into thunderous applause, cheering for her wonderful performance. Zhang Qiu was successfully elected as the Seeker and returned to the audience to sit with Hermione and others. Next, it was Ting's turn. Perhaps they forgot to make a cheering banner for Ting. Before going on stage, Ting saw Hermione hastily scribbled his name on a piece of paper, and then directly used magic to stick it on the previous banner, covering Zhang Qiu's name, and the other parts were intact. This was considered a banner to cheer for Ting. Ting was a little speechless. This was too perfunctory. Amid the cheers of several people, Ting quickly walked into the court. He participated in the selection of chasers. In the sport of Quidditch, each team consists of 7 members, each with their own duties. Among them, the Seeker is responsible for chasing the golden snitch. Once it is captured, it can get 150 points, and the game is over. The 3 chasers are responsible for passing the quaffle to each other, trying to get it to pass through the opponent's ring, to score points. Every time the quaffle passes through the ring, it can get 10 points. The goalkeeper is the last line of defense of the team, responsible for protecting the 3 rings of the team from being passed by the quaffle. The last 2 beaters are responsible for hitting the bludgers with bats, using the bludgers to attack the opponent's players and disrupt their games. Overall, the 7 people on the Quidditch field play 3 games. The Seekers play a game of racing and chasing, showing speed and passion in the air. The sports of chasers and goalkeepers are very similar to a combination of football and basketball, except that they are riding on brooms. At the same time, all the players have to play dodgeball with the batter. However, the batter is the one who hits the ball, and they are the ones who get hit. How should I put it? In Ting's eyes, Quidditch is really weird. It's a complete hodgepodge, just like holding 3 different sports games at the same stadium at the same time. As a result, the 3 sports venues overlap. Not only do everyone have to compete seriously, but they also have to worry about being disturbed by athletes from other games at any time. What's worse is that no one cares about the victory or defeat of a single game. Everyone only cares about the total score of the 3 games. It's simply a chimera in the sports world, just like those Indian movies that are full of bitterness, martial arts, singing, and dancing. Well, considering the limited wizard population, it is not enough to support too many sports competitions, but wizards have different preferences. In order to satisfy everyone's preferences, Song can mix multiple sports into one. This is understandable. Just like some Bollywood movies, the reason why they are a hodgepodge is that for poor areas, movies are a rare mass entertainment project and need to satisfy the preferences of different groups of people at the same time. Soon, Ting stood side by side with other young wizards and prepared for the next selection. Looking around, he had many competitors, including several experienced old players, Roger Davis and Jeremy Stratton in the 3rd grade, and Randolph Burrow in the 4th grade. However, Ting didn't consider anyone as an opponent. He must occupy a place. This confidence comes from Amber's flying talent, the physical fitness enhanced by the werewolf, and his modified high-performance flying broom. With these advantages, his goal is not just to become an ordinary team member. He comes to be the core of the team. The so-called substitute quota is just a wedge for him to join the team. No matter whether he is a substitute or not, as long as he can show a crushing advantage, someone will naturally lift him to the core position. Okay, everyone, our people are finally here. Captain Becky clapped his hands and focused everyone's attention on him. Then, the selection of chasers will begin now. Let me introduce the rules first. It's very simple. There are only 2 tests, racing test and pitching test. The selection method of the academy has always been straightforward. There are no cumbersome physical data tests such as height, weight, body fat percentage, etc., nor do you need to fly back and forth in the half court, or sprint across 3/4 of the court, and there will be no complicated 7v7 competitions. Those are the items that only Quidditch clubs have in their physical tests. It is said that in some old clubs, there will be tests for staying up all night. After all, the end of a Quidditch game depends on the capture of the golden snitch. If the golden snitch is not caught, it will not end. Just like last year's Quidditch World Cup final, the game lasted 5 days and 5 nights, and Scott the Lawn team was once close to the championship, but in the end, due to lack of energy, the Canadian team won the championship. It can be seen that the ability to stay up late is also an important test for Quidditch players. If you can't stay up late, you will lose. This may also be why many Quidditch players start to fight hair loss at a young age. First is the speed test. Captain Becky explained loudly to the players, "Do you see those magic rings in the sky? You need to ride a flying broom and pass through each ring in order. Do you understand? The number and time of passing the rings will affect your results. If you have a flying broom, use your own. If you don't have one, come to me to get the special sweeping 7 stars for the test." Most of the young wizards who came to take the test did not have their own flying brooms. Not only the Muggle wizards who lacked galleons were like this, but also many half-blood and even pure-blood young wizards. After all, a brand new flying broom costs hundreds of galleons. After the firebolt is launched in the future, the upper limit of the price of flying brooms will directly enter the 4-digit range, which is undoubtedly a huge expense for ordinary wizard families with an average annual income of more than 1,000 galleons. Of course, second-hand flying brooms are more affordable and are a good choice, but the quality and safety cannot be guaranteed. After long-term use, performance and safety are inevitable. The reason why those old flying brooms at Hogwarts are still usable is thanks to the careful maintenance of Mrs. Hodge, a professional. Episode 64, Ravenclaw's Hope. Ting did not need to receive the test broom. He took out his own Nimbus 2000 directly from his baseball cap. As soon as this latest flying broom appeared, it immediately attracted the attention of all the little wizards around. They exclaimed and gathered around, wanting to appreciate the style of Nimbus 2000 more closely. Ting noticed that even the Captain Becky's eyes showed a trace of envy. As the latest product of Nimbus Company, the high price of Nimbus 2000 is far beyond his affordability. Okay, everyone, stop crowding, and disperse. As the captain, Becky dispersed the small nets that were increasingly watching. He turned to Ting, his eyes flashing with expectation. Ting, you come and show everyone the speed of Nimbus 2000, so that everyone can open their eyes. Ting did not refuse, and he lifted his leg and sat on Nimbus 2000. The selection of the Quidditch school team was just a piece of cake for him. The magic ring hanging in the sky is huge and eye-catching, and the distance is wide enough. For those who can skillfully control the flying broom, the difficulty of this test is not great. But the selection is not an exam, and it is not enough to pass the test. What the contestants really need is to be faster than their competitors. This is the first time that Ting rides the modified Nimbus 20-00 in school. As soon as he got on, Ting felt that this broom was completely different from any other he had ridden before. Whether it is the old broom in the flying class, the original Nimbus 2000, or the sweep 1 star that he had modified, this broom is undoubtedly a qualitative leap. This is also natural. You know, this is a unique flying broom that Ting created by gathering all the top parts of all the accessories he collected and installing them on this Nimbus 2000 without thinking. In terms of performance alone, Ting believes that even the firebolt in 2 years, or the flying broom in 20 or 30 years, cannot compare with the modified broom under his crotch. For example, the seat of this modified version of the Nimbus 2000 even has a backrest. As soon as he sat on it, Ting felt an invisible magic seat belt wrapped around his body, allowing him to sit firmly on the broom. This level of comfort and safety is beyond the reach of ordinary brooms. As Ting's mind moved, the broom was like an arrow from a string, taking him up to the sky at high speed. This selection test was a piece of cake for him. He shuttled lightly between one magic ring after another, and the turning arc was much smaller than anyone else, which not only demonstrated the extraordinary speed and flexibility of the broom, but also highlighted his excellent control skills. When Ting landed steadily, thunderous applause broke out in the field. Some little witches even screamed with excitement and wanted to rush forward to hug Ting, but the scene was so crowded that they could only sigh in despair. Great! 45 seconds. All 25 magic rings have been passed. Becky held an hourglass in her hand and danced with excitement. I don't know if he was praising Ting or praising his Nimbus 2000, but in fact, Ting has tried his best to fly as slowly as possible, just to avoid showing too much performance that exceeds the Nimbus 2000. Otherwise, with his broom's acceleration of no more than 1 second for 100 meters and a maximum speed that can break the sound barrier, it would not be a problem to reduce this result by half. Although the next contestants also tried their best, their results were obviously inferior to Yi Ting's. Among all the contestants, only Roger Davis passed through all 25 rings, and the other two old team members made some mistakes and only passed through 24. And Roger's result was also as long as 1 minute and 35 seconds, almost twice that of Yi Ting. This sharp contrast further highlights Yi Ting's outstanding strength. With just this first test, Yi Ting's status as a player was almost certain, but he still participated in the second test, pitching. The rules are also very simple. Throw the ball into the ring at different positions. The higher the hit rate, the greater the chance of being selected. This is naturally a piece of cake for the highly skilled Yi Ting. He flew to the designated pitching point and threw the ball 10 times in a row, all of which hit the ring accurately. But the most amazing thing about Yi Ting is his shooting speed, which is even more astonishing. Whenever he receives the ball, he can throw it directly without any adjustment, and it will definitely go in. This made Becky, who was watching the game, stunned and his eyes lit up. In the fierce competition, this ability to shoot in seconds is undoubtedly a killer. Once a chaser receives the quaffle, he will often become the focus of the opponent's siege. The enemy's chasers will come to steal him, and the batsman will drive the bludgers to interfere with him. In this tense and exciting situation, the longer the aiming time for passing or shooting, the greater the risk of being stolen. However, players like Yi Ting who can shoot in seconds can make decisions in an instant, not giving the opponent any chance to react, thus gaining an absolute advantage in tactics. Yi Ting can do this by chance. Amber is not only the flying champion of Mondstadt, but also an excellent archer with the special skill of hitting 2 hills with 1 arrow. In addition, Amber is also good at throwing, and throwing the Earl of Rabbit is her specialty. These talents are all reflected in the process of Yi Ting throwing the quaffle. What's more, Yi Ting also has Sucrose's Eye of God. The Eye of God does not need a wand to shoot, and the power of the wind element is invisible and intangible. If Yi Ting is willing to play a little bit, it is not a problem to control the trajectory of the quaffle at will. At some point, Professor Flitwick also came to the court. He signaled everyone to be silent so as not to disturb Yi Ting, who was concentrating on the test. He waved his wand and kept directing the quaffle to fly to the court. However, these balls did not fly directly to Yi Ting, but deliberately flew to different positions on the court to test Yi Ting's ability to catch the ball. Yi Ting had to drive the flying broom to catch the ball everywhere and then shoot. Compared with the previous test, Professor Flitwick obviously increased the difficulty, but Yi Ting seemed not to notice it and looked like he was enjoying it. Professor Flitwick passed a total of 128 balls. What was amazing was that Yi Ting not only caught all of them, but also accurately threw the ball into the goal every time. Throughout the process, Yi Ting seemed to have turned into a god of war on the court. No matter which corner the ball flew to, he could handle it with ease. Bottom corner, in front of the goal post, in the penalty area, outside the penalty area, and even outside the half court, his pitching was no dead angle, and every shot was amazing. When the last ball came, Yi Ting had already chased to the bottom line of his own team. He casually aimed and easily sent the super long shot across the entire court into the goal. This monstrous performance immediately triggered thunderous cheers. In fact, when the difficulty was increased to this point, Yi Ting could no longer guarantee that he would hit the target every time. Amber was only the flying champion of Mondstadt, not the god of wind. So, this time, Yi Ting made a slight exception and secretly used the power of the Eye of God. At the moment of pitching, he attached the wind elemental force to the quaffle, allowing the ball to enter the goal steadily. But in any case, in the eyes of outsiders, he had completed this challenge that even many professional players might not be able to do. Professor Flitwick stood on the training platform, his hands on his hips, his face filled with unconcealable joy. Seeing this, there was no need to say more about Yi Ting's level. He could only say that this young man's talent in Quidditch was almost as good as his talent in the field of magic. Seeing this, he was no longer concerned about whether he was a substitute or a regular player. With the precedent of Harry Potter, Flitwick made an exception for Yi Ting without any pressure. Professor Flitwick had already thought that the future of the Ravenclaw Quidditch team lay in Yi Ting. This team had been silent for a long time and had been hovering at a low point. Now it finally welcomed a key figure who could turn the tide. The professor was determined to use Yi Ting as the cornerstone to reshape the team's former leisure academy. In the process of reconstruction, not only new players need to be introduced, but also old tactics need to be innovated. The most critical thing is to hand over the core of the team to Yi Ting, let him lead the game, give all the balls to him, and all the tactics revolve around him. Yi Ting also knew this tacitly. Although this strategy sounds extreme, even a bit unconventional, and somewhat similar to the snail shell, it is undoubtedly the best way to break the deadlock for Ravenclaw, which has been ranked at the bottom for a long time. Yi Ting is responsible for scoring goals, while Zhang Qiu is responsible for finding the golden snitch. This is the dual core of the future team. When Yi Ting landed from the sky, Professor Flitwick held his hand tightly, and his wrinkles were full of excitement and expectation. His face was full of smiles, like a blooming chrysanthemum. Students from other colleges around him cast awe and envy at them. They knew that the Ravenclaw Quidditch team would usher in a new future under the leadership of Ting. In the following days, in the corridors and dining tables of Hogwarts, people talked about the Quidditch selection everywhere. Ting's amazing performance in the selection was like a blockbuster, causing an uproar in Hogwarts. Some people even joked that Ting was simply a bug on the court, and his appearance was simply a dimensionality reduction attack on other players. When the Ting threat theory came out, it naturally caused many people to sneer, but this voice does exist. The opponents argued, no matter how well Ting flies and how accurate his pitch is, it is only a performance on the training ground. Training and real competition on the court are two different things. Speed and open hit rate cannot explain anything. In a fierce confrontation, how can you have so many opportunities to shoot with peace of mind? The bludger is used to disrupt the game, and there are all kinds of foul tricks on the court. In the eyes of many people, Ting, a novice, can't prove anything just by his accurate pitching. Hearing these discussions, Ting just smiled. Time will prove everything, and those who put forward the threat theory are the ones who really have vision. However, as a newcomer to the team, Ting has already enjoyed the privilege of being a ball hog before he even officially played a game. He doesn't participate in training. In other words, he never participates in basic training, but only participates in the team's tactical training to develop tacit understanding with the players. Herbert Fleet, the original chaser who was replaced by Ting, is now a substitute, but he can replace Ting as a tool man in training. This frees up a lot of time for Ting to concentrate on his work. During this period, Ting seemed to be possessed, spending the whole day in the room of requirement tinkering with his clockwork machinery, even forgetting about night activities. He is really busy now. Research projects come one after another, and the to-do list is piled up. In addition to clockwork machinery, he also has to take care of his potted plants and prepare nutrient solution every day. He also has to spend time repairing the vanishing cabinet. This job is not complicated, but it requires persistent spells. Spending time digesting the books copied from the library is a daily must-read homework. He also has to use his divine tongue to study various potions. In order to improve research efficiency, Ting even combined transfiguration, thunder element and fire element together to create a welding spell. The effect is to perfectly fuse two pieces of metal together, which plays a lot of role in the process of manufacturing clockwork mechanical parts. There is actually a reason why he is so low-key now. Not only Professor Snape, but even Professor McGonagall seems to have a lot of complaints about him, and recently, he always wants to find fault with him in the Transfiguration class. That look was just like Ting had nurtured the cabbage she had carefully cultivated. Fortunately, Professor Dumbledore had given him a shot of prevention in advance, so that he would not be at a loss when facing Professor McGonagall's difficulties. In the end, Professor Dumbledore was really a rare kind person in Hogwarts. Fortunately, Ting was talented enough in magic, and no matter how picky Professor McGonagall was, she could not find any flaws in him. In the end, she could only warn him not to lead Hermione astray. Are you kidding? Is he that kind of person? In the whole Hogwarts, who can be more obedient than Ting? Professor McGonagall should be glad that Hermione is completely close to him and will become more and more outstanding under his influence. In a blink of an eye, school has been open for 2 months, and Halloween is quietly approaching. At this time, it was still morning and evening, and Ting woke up in the room of requirement early in the morning, and started to get busy before class. The room of requirement has changed a lot. The house was brightly lit, with 2 rows of workbenches neatly arranged on 2 adjacent walls. One row was a standard wizard workbench, filled with a variety of crucibles, flasks, and test tubes, and the automatic cutter was constantly cutting medicinal materials, making a rhythmic, clicking sound. The other row of workbenches exuded a steampunk atmosphere, with furnaces and stamping machines, and the tool racks were full of wrenches, screwdrivers, and other tools. Various parts were scattered on the table, including alchemical devices such as magic crystals and magic prisms. If it weren't for these typical magic elements, this place would be like the workshop of 10 Muggle engineers. Except for crucibles and test tubes, most of the equipment here was brought by the room of requirement. Ting originally just wanted a room where he could brew potions and study magic, so the room of requirement directly created a professional laboratory for him. As Ting brewed more and more potions, he also had the need to study clockwork machinery, so the equipment in the room of requirement became more and more abundant. The only thing that made Ting feel regretful was that this room could not provide raw materials, and all the experiments had to be completed at his own expense. Although he had some savings before and earned a considerable income by reselling crucibles, these funds seemed a bit stretched in the face of a large amount of research. Episode 65. It's Halloween again. As time went by, Ting had a good understanding of the room of requirement. Through previous experiments, Ting had already determined the scope of the room of requirement. Within this scope, as long as you state your needs, it will be presented as you wish. For example, Ting did not want anyone other than himself to enter the room. After making such a request, the room of requirement would completely guarantee the privacy of the laboratory and prohibit anyone other than him from entering. Ting could safely put the finished parts and semi-finished potions here. It was very safe and there was no need to worry at all. Occasionally, he would stay overnight here, and the room would turn into a luxurious bed according to his request. This luxurious bedroom with its own bathroom was a world apart from the four-person room in the dormitory. Now, next to Ting's workbench, there was a large puppet made entirely of clockwork machinery. The puppet was 2 meters and 5 meters tall, and was made of metal all over. The ubiquitous gears showed its identity as a clockwork machine. The overall appearance of the puppet is a warrior in armor, holding a round shield in the left hand and a short spear in the right hand. This is the first result of Ting's reference to the design of the Fontaine clockwork mechanism and then localized transformation. Specialized mechanism for attacking the enemy, Test Unit 01. At this time, Ting carefully completed the last step and installed the magic furnace core into the body of the mechanical puppet. As a humanoid machine, this specialized mechanism for attacking the enemy is one of the most complex machines even among the many mechanisms of Fontaine, which took Ting a lot of thought. It took him 2 full months to make this one. This is when everything went well for him. In the final analysis, the key to the work is to redesign the parts originally based on the Menghuang 670 energy so that they can operate with magic power. This work is tedious and simple, but it requires carefulness and patience. Such a large mechanical puppet has a variety of parts inside, and the process of debugging and modification is also quite time-consuming. Unknowingly, more than a month has passed, but all these efforts are worth it. Everything is difficult at the beginning. It's not that Ting is too ambitious, but he needs to pass the specialized offensive mechanism, Prototype Unit 01, to conduct 10 series of technical tests. Since specialized offensive mechanism, Prototype Unit 01 involves almost most types of components, in the process of manufacturing it, Ting directly redesigned all the Menghuang components and changed them to magic components. With these technical reserves, when designing other clockwork machines next, there is no need to repeat the wheel, which can save a lot of time. Ting is now worried about only one problem: money. The graphite crucible has been sold for 2 months, and the customers who need it in the entire Hogwarts have basically been developed, and no matter what, no more money can be squeezed out. But the various materials consumed in research and the cost of metal for manufacturing parts have to be spent continuously. A humanoid machine more than 2 meters tall, you can imagine how expensive it is. Ting needs a new source of income. However, now is not the time to consider these. Class time was about to start, and Ting didn't even have time to test it before he stuffed the Specialized Attack Mechanism Test Unit 01 he had built into the king's treasury and left the room of requirement. Perhaps because he had stayed in the house for too long, as soon as he stepped out of the door, Ting felt his eyes light up, as if the entire castle had been dressed up for the holidays overnight. In the corridor, the sweet smell of roasted pumpkins wafted into the air, stimulating people's taste buds, because all kinds of pumpkin lanterns were hung in every corner. When students walked by, bats would occasionally jump out of the lanterns, giving everyone a little scare. Oh, by the way, you have to be careful that the one jumping out is Peeves. If any unlucky little wizard ran into him, he might be scared or even splashed with cold water, giving him a chill. Fortunately, Professor McGonagall had already given Peeves a vaccination in advance, and paint could not be used tonight. Halloween is also the most important day of the year for ghosts. The ghosts in the castle are also busy wandering around, making final preparations for the evening party. Although the festive atmosphere in the castle is strong, the courses of the little wizards are still not affected. The professors also took advantage of the heat of the festival to add a lot of fun to the class. In the first herbal class in the morning, Professor Sprout enthusiastically introduced a special magic pumpkin. This pumpkin has a strange feature. As long as someone approaches, it will suddenly jump on the other person's head and then smash it hard. Unfortunately, the lifespan of this pumpkin is not very long, because they often collide with each other and end up breaking themselves. Ting thinks that this pumpkin should be used to deal with the corpse, but to be honest, it hurts to be hit by this pumpkin. Ting thought that this pumpkin might interest the mysterious bud. He planned to take this pumpkin back to the dormitory to see if the little bud can include this novel plant. Speaking of which, Ting has spent a lot of time on the mysterious flower bud during this period. In the past 2 months, he has taken good care of the small flower bud, using nutrient solution, growth spell, and sufficient fertilizer. He can be said to have taken good care of it. Now, the flower bud has grown to the size of a wash basin, and the stem has also grown a lot longer. In this process, Ting has also initially understood the ability of the flower bud. One time, he took a Chinese biting cabbage from Professor Sprout's greenhouse and brought it back to the dormitory. He originally planned to try to chop it up and use it as a medicinal material. Who knew that when he put the cabbage next to the flower pot of the flower bud took advantage of Ting's inattention, stretched out its tentacle-like vines to grab the cabbage, and actually absorbed it whole. When Ting discovered the problem, it was too late, and the cabbage was sucked into a pile of black dregs. Then, the flower bud had the ability to produce Chinese biting cabbage seeds and quickly catalyze growth. Since the structure of the biting cabbage is simple, it does not require too much vitality to catalyze. The flower bud can even spray out seeds, allowing the seeds to grow rapidly in the air, and when they land, they become ferocious biting cabbage. This can be regarded as an additional means of self-protection. Ting also realized that this flower bud is not impossible to cultivate plants other than the devil's snare, but the premise is that it needs to include the genes of this plant first. This is easy to do. In terms of plant species, except for professional botanical gardens, there is no place that can surpass the greenhouse of Hogwarts. In order to facilitate education, basically, from the 1st grade to the 7th grade, most of the plants involved in the herbal textbooks are cultivated in the greenhouse of Hogwarts, and those that are not cultivated in the greenhouse can also be found in the Forbidden Forest. Ting can be regarded as the first to get the moon. So, recently Ting has become a wool-pulling maniac. When he sees any new and strange plants in the herbal class, he wants to bring a copy to the little flower bud to enrich its gene pool. The next class is the Transfiguration class. In order to make students more engaged, Professor McGonagall taught everyone how to turn a copper cup into a pumpkin in the Transfiguration class. Although the task was challenging, everyone had a lot of fun. Professor Snape has never been interested in Halloween. No, it should be said that he is not interested in any festival. In order to prevent students from being too excited about the festival, he deliberately delayed the end of Get Out of Class by 20 minutes, which is really well-intentioned. In the Charms class, the atmosphere is completely different. Professor Flitwick enthusiastically showed everyone how to make the pumpkin float. Don't forget the key wrist movement we have been training. He reminded in a shrill voice, one wave and one shake, that's the rhythm. As he said that, the pumpkin floated lightly to the ceiling and hung there faintly. The students were eager to try, but beginners could only start with the most basic feather floating. Ting sat idly by the side, and this spell was simply child's play for him. However, watching the clumsy spell-casting movements of the little wizards, he still found it quite interesting. Neville's face turned red, and the wand seemed to have become a hot potato in his hand. He couldn't cast magic at all, just like a squib. Ron waved his wand like a swordsman, with a look of anxiety and helplessness. Harry was a little better, but he could only make the feathers tremble slightly, as if he was struggling weakly. Although the Ravenclaw students performed equally poorly, they at least practiced strictly according to Professor Flitwick's instructions. No one dared to wave their wands randomly. At this moment, a deafening explosion sounded boom, but all the little wizards, including Professor Flitwick, behaved very calmly, as if they were used to it. Professor Flitwick just smiled slightly and calmly replaced a new feather for Shiyu and Feeshaugen. Hermione had learned this magic a long time ago. She rolled up her sleeves, waved her wand, and chanted the spell, Wingardium Leviosa. Her feather immediately obeyed the order, floated up from the table, and hung steadily 4 feet above her head. Oh, well done. 5 points for Gryffindor. Professor Flitwick clapped his hands happily. Look, everyone, Miss Granger has succeeded. However, everyone didn't want to look at Hermione, and of course Ting, and avoided their eyes. No one wants to look like a giant monster. The gap makes people feel frustrated. Professor Flitwick turned to Ting with expectation. Although he knew that Ting must have mastered this simple magic, he still wanted to see it with his own eyes. After all, a successful spell could win 5 points for Ravenclaw. It would be a waste if he didn't want it. Ting didn't even use his wand. He just focused on the feather on the table, and then the feather flew into the air. Ting had a blank expression on his face. He didn't even take out his wand. He just focused on the feather on the table. Then, the feather rose out of thin air and floated lightly in the air in front of Ting. Ting can actually cast the levitation spell without a wand and silently, someone exclaimed. The kids didn't react to Ting's amazing performance, or rather, they were numb. The gap between them was like a natural chasm, which was beyond reach. Everyone is the same age. Some have already mastered advanced magic skills, while others are still standing still. The gap between people is greater than that between people and trolls. 5 points for Ravenclaw, Professor Flitwick announced with a smile on his face, and he was obviously very happy. These 5 points in each class are basically a guarantee for Ting. This is all thanks to Ting, who is a scoring weapon for Ravenclaw. If he can be more active in class and ask more questions, then Ting will bring more points to Ravenclaw. Flitwick seemed to see that the House Cup was within reach for Ravenclaw. They haven't won the House Cup for at least 10 years. Of course, Hermione is not a pushover either, and has been working hard to add points for Gryffindor. But it doesn't matter. These points will be deducted by the little lions themselves. It has been 2 months since the start of school. Looking at the current ranking of college scores, Ravenclaw is firmly at the top of the list. Although Slytherin has been trying to catch up, it can only be ranked second. And what about Gryffindor? They seem to have gotten used to the last place, and even set a new record for deductions. Professor Flitwick was very happy and encouraged himself secretly. At this pace, this year's college cup will be easy to win. At this time, Neville was still waving his wand over and over again, shaking his wrist, but no matter what he did, the feather stubbornly lay on the table, unmoving. Hermione gently instructed Neville, "Neville, it's Yugadem Leviosa, you have to say the word plus long and clear, so that you can better control the magic." Neville scratched his head in annoyance, "But I always have a bad grasp of the time to say it." "It doesn't matter, you try to look at the watch." Hermione smiled and shared the tip she summarized, "Extend the word plus to 3 seconds, and you will basically succeed." Neville tried it again according to Hermione's suggestion, but the feather still didn't move. Hermione patiently pointed out his 2 mistakes and encouraged him to try again, and finally made the feather float up. Susan, who was standing by, saw this scene and asked Hermione, "Hermione, do you see anything wrong with my gestures? For the 3rd move, your wrist is too small, it should be like this." Hermione carefully observed Susan's gestures, then pointed it out, while holding the wand and shaking it gently, demonstrating to Susan. Hannah, who was sitting in the front, also turned around and said enthusiastically, "Hermione, it's my turn, help me find my problem." During this period of time, Hermione has made a lot of friends, most of whom are students from Hufflepuff College. In a place like school where social relations are relatively simple, a top student can quickly gain a lot of friends as long as he is willing to help the poor students, of course. The premise is that the way of speaking is not so chaotic. Ever since Hermione complained that she had no friends in Gryffindor, Ting has been concerned about this matter. Of course, he did not ask Hermione to introduce her roommate to him as he joked, but he still gave Hermione some small suggestions and took the initiative to introduce his friends to her. For a top student like Hermione, as long as she is willing to change her attitude, making friends is not difficult at all. Of course, Ting also has the advantage of doing this, that is, outsourcing the task of tutoring his peers. As the de facto king of children in the first year of Ravenclaw, it is also one of his responsibilities to answer questions and solve problems for his friends in schoolwork. Otherwise, why would he be supported by his friends? Because he is handsome? Ting does know that he is handsome, but this appearance can only be used to deal with the opposite sex in most cases. In short, now that someone is willing to help him share the work, he is more than happy. Episode 66. Malfoy is attacked. After patiently explaining to the friends around her, Hermione turned back excitedly and her eyes fell on the book in Ting's hand. After completing the class task, Ting has been reading this book. About the advanced application of runes in alchemy? She read curiously. "Yes, I'm studying alchemy recently." Ting said, "I want to try to use magic to drive Muggle machinery, and I hope this book can give me some ideas." "Oh, so that's it." Hermione nodded in understanding, and was not surprised by Ting's research. During this period of time, she often saw Ting studying advanced magical knowledge. After 2 months of getting along, Hermione has gradually realized the gap between herself and Ting, and began to try to treat Ting as a little teacher around her. But this did not prevent her from competing with Ting for the college cup and winning the 1st place in the grade. However, she didn't want to talk about this today. "Halloween is coming soon, what are your plans?" Hermione pretended to ask casually, "How about we go to the library to review and do homework together? After all, the exam will be in 8 weeks. Why do you start thinking about the exam 2 months in advance? Generally speaking, shouldn't you start preparing 2 weeks before the exam?" Ting was confused. He didn't expect Hermione to be so obsessed with the exam. Halloween should do what Halloween should do, such as dressing up as monsters and attending banquets. "So, what do you want to dress up as for Halloween?" Susan also came over curiously and asked. She had just successfully made the feather fly a short distance, and confirmed that it was not due to the wind, so she happily stopped practicing and joined the group chat. "I'm not sure yet. I just find it strange, why do wizards also celebrate Halloween?" Halloween was originally established by druids to communicate with ghosts, goblins, and spirits of all things. Susan explained, "In fact, we also want to know why Muggles also celebrate Halloween." She did not continue to delve into this topic, but enthusiastically invited, "How about we go for a walk by the Black Lake in the evening? It must be very pleasant to feed the fish in the cool breeze." Ting thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. He did not notice that Hermione, who was sitting next to him, had an ugly look on her face and a hint of disappointment flashed in her eyes. At this moment, Harry, who was sitting in the back row, poked Ting's back with a feather pen and said in a low voice, Ting, I have something to ask you." Hermione heard Harry's movement and seemed to have found an excuse. She snorted and turned her head away to ignore them. Ever since she reminded Harry and Ron not to be fooled by Malfoy's tricks and not to go out at night, but the two did not listen and were caught, and they were deducted a lot of points, Hermione has been indifferent to them. That was a full 100 points. How long would it take her to add it back? As a result, it was all deducted in one night. Harry was a little embarrassed, but he still asked, "Well, Ting, if I want to catch an animal, how can I catch it without anyone noticing? And it's best not to let others and the animal see us." Ron added. Ting pondered for a long time before slowly speaking. "Come on, Harry, are you two in trouble again?" Otherwise, you should turn yourself in. Looking at the mysterious look of the two of them, Ting knew clearly that they must be plotting something. This kind of question reminded Ting of a joke. A netizen posted a question: when killing a pig at home, too much blood spurted onto the wall, what should I do? Another person posted a question: there is too much pork in the refrigerator. After the refrigerator breaks down, the whole house is full of stench. What should I do? Someone else posted a question: bones at home are accidentally stuck in the sewer and can't be removed. What should I do? How to deal with it? Of course, I suggest you turn yourself in. So Ting will certainly not participate in their conspiracy, let alone give professional advice. What if he is regarded as an accomplice? After class, Ting, Hermione, and Susan walked slowly towards the auditorium together, but were stopped by Malfoy. You two go to the auditorium first to take seats, I will be there later. Ting winked at Hermione and Susan, and followed Malfoy to the corner. Malfoy came to see Ting, and of course there was only one thing he could talk about. Mr. Ting, what do you think about the incident at the beginning of the school term? I still say that if we join forces, we will surely sweep Hogwarts. It's not that I don't want to, but I really can't protect myself now. Ting shook his head with a bitter face. Someone reported me to Professor McGonagall, falsely accusing me of night wandering, and Professor McGonagall has been watching me. Malfoy frowned, recalling that Ting has been very low-key recently, and it turned out that he was being targeted. Who is so bold that he dares to report you? He immediately volunteered, I'll call Goyle and Crabbe to give him a taste of his own medicine. Ting looked embarrassed. This man has a strong backstage, you may not be able to touch him. Strong backstage? Malfoy laughed disdainfully. My father is a school director, what else can't be dealt with? It's Professor Snape. Ting said. Malfoy's expression stiffened instantly. That's right, it was Professor Snape who complained about me to Professor McGonagall. Ting patted Malfoy on the shoulder and said half-jokingly, if you can deal with him, I will not only return all the galleons you gave me, but also give you more money. Seeing that Malfoy remained silent, Yi Jian asked tentatively, isn't your father a school director? See if you can kick Snape out of Hogwarts? Seeing that Malfoy finally shut up his chattering mouth, Ting secretly breathed a sigh of relief. This little snake came to harass him once or twice a week, and every time he nagged about the protection fee, which really annoyed him. What made him laugh and cry the most was that this kid always put on a flattering attitude, so that he couldn't find a reason to get angry. In desperation, he could only use this last trick. It is estimated that in this way, Malfoy will be quiet for a long time and will no longer bother him. When Ting left with a hint of disappointment, Malfoy still stood there with a gloomy face. He didn't expect that his own dean would become a stumbling block to his dominance of Hogwarts. He was just about to step towards the hall when his eyes suddenly lit up and he saw a familiar figure that he could dream of at night: Harry Potter. Harry ran towards a corridor stealthily, looking back from time to time, afraid of being discovered. Malfoy's heart moved. The last time he tricked Potter into a duel, he and Weasley were deducted 50 points. This grudge was a big one. Coupled with the unexpected erotic French kiss, the relationship between the two sides was even more hostile, and they wanted to kill each other. Now seeing Potter's mysterious look, Malfoy followed without thinking. If he found anything unusual, he would certainly not rush up stupidly, but would immediately run to the hall to find Professor Snape. For him now, deducting points from Potter was the greatest pleasure. Seeing Potter turn into the depths of the corridor, Malfoy followed him on tiptoe. He stuck his head out carefully along the corner to peek at the situation ahead. Then he saw Potter slip into a bathroom. Eh? Didn't he remember that it was a women's bathroom? Malfoy felt an indescribable excitement. Going to the women's bathroom to peep? Potter is playing too perverted. This is big news. It will definitely cause a big uproar if it is told out. A better idea flashed through Malfoy's mind. If he rushed over at this moment, locked the door of the women's bathroom from the outside, and then rushed to the hall and summoned everyone to watch, wouldn't Potter be embarrassed? If it doesn't work, he can use this matter to bribe Ting, so that his dream of dominating Hogwarts can be realized. No matter how you look at it, this is a win-win situation. Just do it. Malfoy walked out from the corner and approached the bathroom quietly. Every step was cautious, like an experienced hunter approaching prey. However, just as he was crossing an intersection, suddenly, a figure suddenly jumped out from another corridor, holding a hollowed-out pumpkin in his hand, and slammed it on his head. Malfoy thought it was not good and roared, "Who? Which bastard dares to plot against me?" As soon as he finished speaking, Harry rushed out of the bathroom and deliberately said in a hoarse voice, "Malfoy, I am the Bloody Baron. You have been too arrogant recently, so I specially asked Peeves to teach you a lesson." Malfoy would not be fooled easily. "You are playing tricks. Don't think I don't know it's you, Potter. And that idiot Wesley is here too, right?" Harry and Ron smiled at each other. but did not speak. Since the last night tour, they have been looking for an opportunity to teach Malfoy, the bastard, a profound lesson. This time, they finally got the chance. The two of them tacitly clamped Malfoy's arms, dragged him into the women's bathroom, and quickly locked the door from the outside just as Malfoy himself imagined. Malfoy struggled to tear off the big pumpkin on his head and turned the doorknob angrily, only to find that the door was locked from the outside. His wand was taken away just now, so he had to bang the door hard and threaten loudly, "Potter, wait until I get out, and you'll see." However, his shouting was doomed to be in vain, because at this moment, all the students have already rushed to the auditorium, and no one will notice the movement here. The Halloween party is about to begin. When the little wizards stepped into the restaurant, they were shocked by the scene in front of them. Above the auditorium, huge pumpkin lanterns were floating like ghosts, and small bats stayed on the lanterns. They occasionally flapped their wings and danced in groups in the air, causing the little wizards to exclaim again and again. On the ceiling, layers of dark clouds covered the entire auditorium, making the whole auditorium fall into a dark place. The faint candlelight burning in the pumpkin lanterns added a bit of weirdness to the party. After some arrangements, the festive atmosphere was full. Professor Dumbledore stood up, gave a short speech, and then shared a joke that he had kept. Although no one except him seemed to find the joke funny, everyone still applauded enthusiastically, because it meant that his speech was finally over. The dinner finally began, and plates of delicious food appeared on golden plates, all of which were traditional Halloween delicacies, and the tempting aroma filled the hall. However, in this joyful atmosphere, some people still felt out of place and only felt that the scene was noisy. Pansy couldn't find Draco. She looked around anxiously, but she couldn't find him. In a hurry, she asked everyone Draco knew, and even ran to the Hufflepuff table to ask Ting about Draco's whereabouts. "Ting, have you seen Draco?" Pansy asked anxiously. "Crabbe said he came to see you?" "No." Ting shook his head. "The last time I saw him was at the door of the auditorium, before the dinner 237 started. We chatted for a few words and then separated." "Didn't he come?" Yu raised his eyebrows slightly, and his eyes unconsciously turned to the direction of the Gryffindor table. He probably guessed what was going on. At this moment, the door of the ceremony was suddenly pushed open, and Professor Quirrell rushed in a disheveled state. His face was flushed and full of fear. He stumbled to Professor Dumbledore's chair, fell on the table, and said angrily, "The giant monster, in the underground classroom. I thought you should know." As soon as the voice fell, Professor Quirrell fell to the floor, and seemed to have fainted. The restaurant suddenly fell into chaos, and the little wizards talked about it. Although everyone boasted that they could beat 8 or 10 trolls per person, the young wizards panicked immediately when they heard that there was a troll in the castle. Professor Dumbledore raised his wand high and made several sharp explosions in the air, finally restoring order. In the chaos, Professor Snape sneaked up to Quirrell, who was lying on the ground, and kicked him hard on the back of his head to see if he was really unconscious. However, Quirrell remained motionless, as if he was really unconscious. Then he was kicked again. "Prefects," Professor Dumbledore said in a low and powerful voice, "immediately lead the students of your college back to the lounge to ensure their safety. Professors, follow me to the underground classroom. We must find the troll." The young wizards of Hufflepuff stood up and followed the prefect to the common room. They talked a lot, and some even speculated whether the troll was a special program tonight. Ting and Susan looked at each other helplessly, and the plan to go for a walk in the Black Lake was ruined. Suddenly, Ting found 2 figures, Harry and Ron. "They shouldn't be here." He asked Susan to go back to the dormitory first, then walked over quickly, held Harry and Ron's shoulders, and asked in a low voice, "How did you two get mixed up in the Ravenclaw team?" Harry turned his head with horror on his face, and was relieved when he saw Yi Lu. He hurried forward and said, "Ting, I have something to tell you, but don't tell anyone else." Ting guessed, "Did you lock up Malfoy?" Ron widened his eyes. "How did you know?" Ting rolled his eyes. They asked a weird question in the charms class, and Pansy mentioned Malfoy's disappearance. Putting these clues together, the answer is already obvious. He just lamented the inertia of history. Hermione obviously made friends with his help, and she would not be so angry that she hid in the bathroom and cried alone. In the end, someone was still blocked in the bathroom. Is this bathroom a frozen throne? There must be a Meow King sitting on it, right? Episode 67. Unit 01 vs Giant Monster. Where are the people? Let them out quickly. Ting urged. There is a troll wandering in the castle now. It's no joke to leave Malfoy alone there. We are here for this. Ron explained hurriedly. Now only you can help us. Harry pointed to the corridor in the distance. It's over there. It would be fine if Ting didn't see them, but since he saw them, he naturally couldn't let the two of them look for the troll in the castle. It's not to try to get some collectibles. He sighed pretentiously and followed them. After turning a corner, Ting's keen senses suddenly heard a burst of hurried footsteps. He was quick-witted and quickly pulled the two of them to hide behind a display cabinet. Harry and the others were still confused, but soon, they saw Snape hurriedly crossing the corridor and running upstairs. Why did Snape go to the 3rd floor? Harry muttered in confusion. Shouldn't he be in the dungeon with the other professors? Ting knew very well that Professor Snape must have gone to the restricted area to stop Quirrell. However, he did not intend to explain these, but urged, "Lead the way quickly. After releasing Malfoy, you two have to hurry back to the common room." Several people walked along the corridor, and suddenly, an unbearable stench came to their noses, as if a septic tank exploded, which was disgusting. At the end of the corridor, a huge monster moved slowly. It was 4 meters tall, with dull skin, and a huge and clumsy body like a pile of huge gravel. And on its head, it was a head as small as a cocoa bean, which looked particularly abrupt and funny. However, no one laughed at this moment, because that was the troll they were looking for. Trolls are creatures with infinite power, but their intelligence is as immature as that of children. Despite this, they are classified as XXXX in the biological classification of the magic world, and are as famous as mysterious creatures such as thunderbirds, mermaids, and phoenixes. In other words, this kind of creature is not something that ordinary little wizards can easily fight. Malfoy was trapped alone in the bathroom. He could only lean against the wooden door and listen to the noise outside. Suddenly, he heard a thunderous roar in the corridor, which made him uneasy. He didn't know what happened outside, but the noise in the corridor told him that he had to seek help. He knocked on the wooden door frantically and shouted anxiously, "Come on, no matter who it is, come and save me." At the same time, the troll was walking slowly in the corridor, full of confusion. It didn't understand why it appeared in this strange place after spending a night with a dead deer. It was hungry, and the dead deer, which was supposed to be its delicious meal after waking up, had disappeared. The troll suddenly stopped, and its big ears caught the shouting and barking behind the wooden door, which reminded it of the deer it had hunted before. Harry and Ron stared at the troll nervously, and when they saw it stop at the door of the bathroom, they became nervous, because Malfoy was inside. "Malfoy, stay away from the door," Ting shouted. "Now, hurry." Ting, is that you?" Malfoy was so excited that he almost cried when he heard the familiar voice, and hurriedly ran back obediently. Then, he saw the scene that he would never forget. The huge wooden door was suddenly pierced by a fist as big as a sandbag, and the skin of the fist was a rock-like earthy gray, which seemed extremely hard. Then, a thigh as thick as a tree stump and a pair of flat, rough feet forced their way into the door. An ugly and ferocious giant monster head struggled to squeeze in, but its body was stuck tightly at the door. It waved the stick in its hand angrily and smashed it down, just like a hammer falling on glass, easily breaking down half of the wall. Malfoy stood there, his face as pale as snow. He opened his mouth wide and let out a heart-wrenching scream, his voice full of despair. The troll squeezed into the house with difficulty, looking at Malfoy's thin body in confusion. It couldn't help scratching its little head, as if thinking, how could its wild deer move, and why did it suddenly lose so much weight? However, the troll quickly dispelled its doubts. Who cares, as long as it can be eaten? It dragged the heavy stick and slowly approached Malfoy, ready to break his neck, knock open his head, and then dig out his brain like eating watermelon. Malfoy was completely scared and stunned, as if someone was pinching his neck, and he couldn't even say a word. He slumped on the ground, watching the troll's big hand pinch his head. He closed his eyes in despair, waiting for his fate to come. However, the scene he imagined, where he was grabbed by the troll or had his head crushed, did not happen. Instead, there was a roar from the troll. "Ah!" Just now, Unit 01 used the 1,000-year killing move, using the short spear in its right hand with the element of fire to directly pierce the giant's flower, severely injuring it and successfully diverting the giant's attention. Now, in the eyes of the giant, it doesn't matter whether it is food or not. What's important is that it wants to kill the guy in front of it and avenge its flower. Unit 01 is 2.5 meters tall, which is very tall compared to ordinary people, but after encountering the giant, it became a dwarf. The giant roared, and the huge wooden stick came down from above, with the sound of wind, hitting Unit 01 head-on. Unit 01 calmly raised the shield in his left hand and stretched it in front of him. Dang! The sound of the wooden stick hitting the shield echoed in the bathroom, shaking the surrounding glass to crack. But Unit 01 blocked this thunderous blow steadily. The wooden stick could not break the metal shield at all, and the giant monster's angry attack could not break the output limit of Unit 01. The giant monster seemed very angry about being blocked. Its other hand also grabbed the giant stick and pressed it down angrily, but Unit 01 still managed to resist the giant monster's power steadily, with only one hand. How could a flesh-and-blood body wrestle with a machine? Harry and Ron, who were beside Ting, witnessed all this and were too shocked to speak. They could never imagine that Ting could actually take out such a thing that was similar to the armor in the castle, and that this guy could actually fight the giant monster head-on. But they quickly came to their senses, took the opportunity to carefully bypass the giant monster, and ran towards Malfoy, who was already paralyzed with fear, intending to take Malfoy away. Malfoy might have been scared silly by the giant monster, and when he saw someone finally coming, he immediately hugged Harry's legs tightly as if he had grabbed a life-saving straw and burst into tears. His snot and tears were smeared on Harry's pants. Harry suppressed his discomfort and whispered, "It's okay, don't be afraid." Ron was annoyed when he saw Harry's gentle expression towards Malfoy, and couldn't help urging him, "Hurry up and walk. What if the troll breaks free?" He had no sympathy for Malfoy. If it weren't for Harry and his prank that locked Malfoy here, he wouldn't have appeared here tonight, and even hoped that Malfoy would be smashed into a pulp by the troll. But Malfoy just kept crying and couldn't stand up at all. Harry and Ron looked at each other helplessly, and had to carry him out by one hand and one foot. On the other side, seeing the food being taken away right under his nose, the troll was instantly stimulated. It stood up suddenly, roared, and pounced on Malfoy and the other two again. Seeing the troll shift its hatred again, Unit 01 took the opportunity to attack. It took a half step back, and purple lightning suddenly appeared on the round shield in front of it. At the same time, the magic core in the heart continuously transmitted energy to the shield and legs of Unit 01, and then came the thunder shield strike. At this moment, Unit 01 took a step, like a rhino charging, and its shield hit the giant's but hard, making it fall flat on its face. The crackling current made the giant scream. After being attacked by Unit 01 twice in a row, the giant went berserk first. It finally gave up the delicious food that was about to be in its hands, turned around suddenly, stared at Unit 01 fiercely, and then took a step to hit the guy who had challenged it again with 10 fierce postures. With the size and strength of the giant, if it hit it head-on, most people would be crushed into meat paste. Unit 01, which was stiff all over, was of course not afraid of this, but its reaction was not to resist, but to escape. It was seen that it flashed a short spear in front of the giant's eyes, and then turned and left. Although the AI assigned by Ting to it could not reach the level of intelligent core, it could also give it basic combat strategies and prevent it from standing there mindlessly. When encountering an enemy that it could not defeat, the AI naturally had the option of tactical retreat. The giant monster naturally refused to let him go and immediately chased him. It happened in a split second. Unit 01 seemed to have eyes behind its head. No, it really had a rear monitor. Suddenly turned back and kicked the giant monster's calf accurately. The giant monster fell to the ground like a small mountain, and crashed into the pool next to it. After a long time, it sat up shakily and reached out to wipe the dark blue blood and a big yellow tooth from the corner of its mouth. However, before it could stand up completely, another loud noise came. Unit 01 attacked again, and the short spear was smashed down like a stick, hitting the giant's forehead hard. The giant was knocked to the ground again, and this time it even knocked down the wall. Unit 01 took a step forward and stepped heavily on the giant's chest. The round shield in the left hand emitted lightning, and the short spear in the right hand was enchanted with flames. With one hand in each, it used blunt weapons to hit the giant's head. For a while, continuous clapping sounds rang in the girls' bathroom, crisp and long-lasting. The giant has always been known for its thick skin and flesh, but Unit 01's enchanted attack is even more powerful, and the flame attack has the function of blocking the monster's super recovery ability. Under the continuous attack of Unit 01, the giant completely lost its life. Harry witnessed this scene and couldn't help swallowing his saliva. The shock in his heart was beyond words. Malfoy also forgot to sniff his snot and let it fall on Harry's clothes. Ron was startled and accidentally dropped a bunch of Malfoy's hair. The purely violent attack of Unit 01 completely frightened them. Ting walked to the three of them, looked at their stunned expressions, and smiled warmly. "Are you all right?" He was in a good mood at the moment. The battle just now proved that his mechanical puppet Unit 01 was still perfect, at least in terms of combat power. It met his expectations. But this smile looked very scary in the eyes of the three little wizards. We are fine." The three, Qianli, took a step back in unison. They were frightened by Unit 01 and had not recovered yet. They even threw Unit 01's owner Ting also thought it was a scourge. When Professor McGonagall hurried over, she saw that the bathroom had been mostly reduced to ruins, and the blood on the ground was shocking. She thought it was the blood of the little wizard, and her eyes went dark and she almost fainted. However, when she staggered into the bathroom, she did not see the body of the little wizard or the remains of the body on the ground. She only saw Potter, Malfoy and Weasley sitting on the ground. Malfoy was still sobbing, his voice was ups and downs, as if he was singing, and occasionally he would rub his snot on Potter. In front of them, a ferocious giant monster had fallen in a pool of blood, and all the blood was from it. At the same time, Ting was squatting on the side, not knowing what he was doing. When he saw Professor McGonagall come in, he immediately turned around and waved with a playful smile. Snape walked slowly and stopped at Ting, leaning over to check the troll's miserable state. Then he saw that the thick-skinned monster was now covered with wounds, and its body and head were almost unrecognizable, completely turned into a piece of rotten meat. Snape's pupil shrank sharply. He couldn't imagine what kind of magic could beat the monster like this. Potter and Weasley certainly couldn't do it, so his eyes moved around Ting, looking at him as if he was looking at a rising third-generation Dark Lord. Then, Quirrell also stumbled in. He only took a look at the troll's miserable state, and immediately clutched his collar with both hands, sat on the ground, and sobbed, and the sound was unexpectedly harmonious with Malfoy's sobbing. There were still a few inexplicable footprints on the scarf on his head, and I don't know who did it. Episode 68, Dumbledore's Awareness. Professor McGonagall's face was as white as a piece of paper. After confirming that all the students were safe, she was furious. "What are you doing here? Why don't you stay in the lounge, but come here to join in the fun? Of course they are here to save the world. Professor Snape showed a mocking smile on his face, and said Yin and Yang, how can it be exciting to stay in the lounge? I have learned so many real skills from Professor Quirrell in the defense against the dark arts class, I have to find a chance to show them off. Professor McGonagall, this time it really has nothing to do with me. I heard screams on my way back to the lounge, so I ran over quickly. Ting was full of grievances, and hurriedly raised his hand to defend. If I had come a step later, Mr. Malfoy might have been in danger. Harry and Ron nodded in agreement, trying to pretend that it was true, as if they had heard the screams from far away in the Gryffindor Tower and rushed to rescue people with enthusiasm. Professor Snape fell silent, as if he had not noticed Malfoy's existence. Professor McGonagall frowned and asked, Mr. Malfoy, how did you appear here? Malfoy choked and replied, before the dinner, someone put a pumpkin on my head in the corridor, and then I was inexplicably locked up here. After hearing this, Snape immediately walked to Malfoy and asked in a low voice, who did this? Harry and Ron looked at each other nervously, their hearts beating. Originally, this was just a prank of theirs, and there would not be much consequence. If nothing unexpected happened, even if Malfoy knew who the murderer was, as long as there was no solid evidence, he could only swallow his anger. Let's take a step back and say that even if the truth came out, they would at most be deducted some points and put in solitary confinement. However, the appearance of the troll completely escalated the situation. Now this is no longer a simple prank, but may evolve into a big storm. Maybe it will alarm Headmaster Dumbledore, and even face the serious consequence of being expelled. The two began to panic. Tell me, Draco, was it someone in this room who did it? Snape stared at Malfoy and persuaded him, don't be afraid, I'm here. I think this kind of student should be expelled immediately. I don't know. Malfoy hesitated, glanced at Harry secretly, then looked at Ting, quickly lowered his head, and said weakly, I'm not sure who it belongs to. Snape seemed to be sure of victory. He said slowly, then give me 607 a name, anyone you think is suspicious, I will help you find out. Malfoy stammered and replied, maybe, it was Peeves who did it. Snape almost couldn't help but pat Malfoy on the head when he heard this. It was so hard to find a chance to teach these two little nasty guys a lesson. But you actually said it was Peeves who did it? You didn't use the chance I gave you? You didn't use the chance I gave you. Don't you always have a grudge against them? But no matter how angry Snape was, he could only stare blankly when the person involved was determined to cover up for him. Harry and Ron were relieved, and then looked at Malfoy in disbelief. They were really surprised that Malfoy didn't expose them. At this moment, their impression of Malfoy changed subtly. Professor McGonagall nodded and said seriously, if what Malfoy said is true, then we must severely punish Peeves. Professor Snape was still not satisfied. Peeves may have been misunderstood. He often takes the blame for no reason. We have to act with caution. What do you think? Professor McGonagall asked. Mr. Yi should have nothing to do with this matter. With his ability, he doesn't need to use this method to bully Malfoy, but... He changed the subject and shot his eyes at Harry and Ron like a knife. Potter and Weasley are problematic. Gryffindor Tower is not close to here. How could they hear the shouting? Their appearance here is itself worth pondering. Unless, they knew that Malfoy would be trapped in the bathroom. Ting and Malfoy were speechless after hearing this. What do you mean Ting doesn't need to use this method to bully Malfoy? Ting felt that he was misunderstood. Is he the kind of person who would bully his classmates? Malfoy was even more upset. He was the one who was bullied in the eyes of his dean. Harry and Ron felt nervous and swallowed unconsciously. I will investigate this matter with Professor Dumbledore. Professor McGonagall nodded and turned to Snape. Professor Snape, please take Mr. Malfoy to Madame Pomfrey for a checkup. If he is not injured, take him to the Slytherin common room. Snape snorted coldly and turned to take Malfoy away. Professor Quirrell followed closely and left this place of trouble. You also heard what Professor Snape said. Professor McGonagall turned her eyes to Harry and Ron. I will not give you any extra points or deduct any points until the matter is investigated clearly. Speaking of this, her tone was slightly softer, but I am still very relieved that you can come back to save your classmates. Now go back to the lounge. Finally, she turned to Ting with an approving smile on her face. Ting, you bravely killed the troll and protected your classmates. I will give Ravenclaw 20 points, to commend your heroic behavior. She did not dwell on how Ting killed the troll. In Professor McGonagall's mind, Ting had such power. Harry and Ron fled the room in a panic as if they had been pardoned. They rushed up 2 flights of stairs in one breath until they could no longer smell the disgusting stench of the troll. They dared to breathe heavily. When Ting came out of the toilet, 2 people were waiting for him at the other end of the corridor. Ting took out a large piece of vanilla pie from his pocket and generously shared it with the 2 people. Eat some of this to calm your nerves. Ting, your robot is so cool. Harry took a bite of the pie and exclaimed, it's just like a hero. Ron also excitedly echoed, I've never seen such a powerful machine. Robot, is that the name? Who cares, where did you get it from? I made it myself. Ting nodded, but, as we agreed before, don't reveal this for a short time. Understood, we will keep it secret. The two nodded hurriedly. Next, without Ting asking, Harry and Ron vividly recounted how they locked Malfoy in the toilet. Harry asked in confusion, "How do you think the troll got in?" "I always feel that it is impossible for it to break into the school by itself. Someone must have let it in on purpose." Ting said casually, "I don't know who it is." Now he was thinking about going to the room of requirement to sort out his gains today, but he didn't have the leisure to play detective games with Harry. The three said goodbye at the stairs. Ting's lounge was on this floor, and Harry and Ron had to climb to the fourth floor. Ron couldn't help but muttered, "If it weren't for that old fox Snape, Professor McGonagall would definitely give us extra points. It's good that no points were deducted." Harry sighed, "I thought Malfoy would betray us just now, but I didn't expect him to keep his mouth shut. It really impressed me." "Yeah, I was surprised too." Ron nodded, and then said whimsically, "But will Malfoy use this as a threat to force us to do something we are unwilling to do?" Hearing this, a picture emerged in Harry's mind. Malfoy secretly found him and threatened him viciously. "Potter, you don't want Professor Snape to know what you and Wesley did, right?" Thinking of this, Harry couldn't help but shudder. Late at night, in the headmaster's office, the air was filled with a depressing silence. Malfoy almost died. Finally, Snape's hoarse voice broke the silence. "Don't you have anything to say about this?" His voice was so loud that the former headmasters and the portraits on the wall were woken up. BBBH. They stared at Snape with dissatisfaction, blaming him for his rudeness, but Snape turned a blind eye to these dead people. Dumbledore looked up from the wand magazine in his hand, his deep blue eyes calm. "I remember that you and Lucius have always been at odds. Why? Are you worried about his son now? These are two completely different things." Snape argued angrily, "If something happens to the students, Hogwarts will also be in trouble. I don't want to lose my job because of this." Dumbledore narrowed his eyes slightly, and the figure of a student flashed through his mind. That person also vowed that he didn't want Hogwarts to be closed, but in the end he pushed innocent people into the fire pit. Seeing the headmaster lost in thought, Snape's dissatisfaction became stronger. He knocked heavily on the table, his tone full of sarcasm. Could the great Dumbledore not notice the invasion of the troll? "I don't believe it." Dumbledore sighed softly. "Severus, you think too much of me. After all, I am also immortal, and it is inevitable that I will be negligent." Snape obviously didn't believe this. He stared at the headmaster sharply. "This doesn't seem like an accident at all." "Of course it's not an accident." Dumbledore slowly closed the book and pushed the half-moon glasses on his nose with his fingers. "I went to the Forbidden Forest tonight and did some investigation." He paused and continued, "A Gruul told me that there is one less member of their tribe." "A Gruul?" Snape frowned, thinking that the name sounded like some strange spell. "Who is this?" "He is the leader of the troll tribe closest to our Hogwarts in the Forbidden Forest," Dumbledore explained. "He told me," Dumbledore continued, "some time ago, a black-robed wizard suddenly appeared and took away a member of their tribe." "Wait." Snape looked at Dumbledore with suspicion. "You can actually communicate with trolls?" In Snape's impression, trolls are a group of uncivilized beasts that can only make clumsy snoring sounds. "Well, I just mastered some basic daily communication. Didn't I tell you?" Dumbledore blinked. "In addition to troll language, I can also speak mermaid language, goblin language, and even Parseltongue." "You said you can understand Parseltongue?" Snape couldn't help asking. "I can only understand, but I can't speak." Dumbledore winked playfully. "Every scholar should master at least 20 languages. If you are interested, I can teach you privately." "I'm not interested." Snape refused, coldly. Dumbledore sighed with some disappointment. "So, about the troll named Gruul who told you that they lost a member of their tribe." Snape hesitated for a moment, frowning. "Principal, I don't mean to offend, but you know that trolls have low IQs, right? Can they really count?" "Don't be so prejudiced, Severus." Dumbledore leaned back in his chair, took a sip of tea, and then put down the teacup. "There are exceptions to everything. There are also smart individuals among the trolls. They can understand and speak some simple human languages." Snape snorted impatiently. "That's right. I think if Longbottom is thrown into the pile of trolls, he might be able to become a leader." Dumbledore's face straightened when he heard this. "Severus, we need more patience, including with that child. You know the real reason why Neville has a poor memory." Snape did not respond. "So, the missing troll is the one that ran to Hogwarts?" "That's right." Dumbledore nodded affirmatively. "According to a Gruul's description and the memory I extracted from his mind, a black-robed wizard broke into their tribe and wantonly captured a troll. The wizard obviously held the same prejudice as you, thinking that trolls were simple-minded, so he did not hide his whereabouts at all." "Who is that black-robed wizard?" Snape said anxiously. "I guess it's Quirrell." "Is it really him?" Snape's eyes narrowed into a line, secretly guessing. Could the black-robed wizard who attacked Gringotts be him too? Maybe it's him, maybe not. Dumbledore's words seemed to hide other meanings, but Snape did not delve into it. He asked directly, "Principal, since you already suspect Quirrell, why do you let him stay in school? We can't just make a judgment based on suspicion." Dumbledore said righteously. Seeing Snape looking at him with contempt, he revealed the truth. Because of Harry. We are protecting him, but at the same time we are also training him, cultivating him, and letting him grow in practice. So, I set up a series of levels in the school, and at the end of the level, I left something. This thing can attract both Quirrell and Harry. What is it? Snape's curiosity was completely ignited. Dumbledore shook his head. Severus, I can't tell you now. Snape was silent for a moment, then slowly stood up. I am not interested in your secrets. I just hope that no more accidents will happen. Dumbledore did not make any promises. He knew that accidents were always inevitable in the battle with Voldemort. After all, he was not the omnipotent Merlin. Snape limped to the door, and just as he was about to leave, Dumbledore handed him a delicate little bottle. Fluffy's teeth are highly poisonous and will hinder the healing of wounds. Even you and Madame Pomfrey will find it difficult to prepare the antidote in a short time. These are Fox's tears, take them one. Snape took the bottle, and a complex emotion flashed in his eyes. He didn't say anything, just nodded silently, turned around and left the office. Episode 69, The Troll Killer Arrives. The next morning, the sun shone through the window into the auditorium. Ting recalled what he had gained last night and walked into the auditorium with mixed feelings. Today, he wore a necklace under his clothes. On the necklace was a yellow crystal, and the metal frame around it was in the shape of a thunder drum. The corpse of the giant monster yesterday really fits the category of collection. After collecting it, Ting obtained a new God's Eye Taurus, which is the God's Eye of Arataki Ito. Collecting giant monsters and rewarding Ito's God's Eye may sound strange at first, but if you think about it carefully, it is not difficult to understand. Giant monsters are alien races, and Arataki Ito is a ghost race, also an alien race. Giant monsters are known for their brute force and thick skin and flesh. Ghost races are also known for their brute force and thick skin and flesh. Giant monsters are known for their low intelligence, and Arataki Ito is also famous for the level of elementary school students. Giant monsters are good at using big sticks, and Arataki Ito can also use the Ghost King Gold breaking stick. It's not like Arataki Ito has ever appeared with a giant monster. In short, it's reasonable, very reasonable. The Eye of the Bull naturally gave Ting a lot of Ichido's abilities, but obviously, most of Ichido's abilities are not suitable for the profession of wizard. After all, apart from brute force, this Eye of God can't give him many special abilities. Summoning the Ghost King Jinsha Rod is one of them. In reality, it is the ability to strengthen the weapon with rock elements. Unfortunately, wizards usually don't use physical attacks. The ability to call Nyo is one of them, but Ting didn't get Ichido's Acho, which means that Ting has to find an animal to contract with himself. Besides that, there's nothing else. After all, you can't pass on all of Ichido's skills in playing cards, fighting insects, and snatching children's lollipops to him. Think carefully, it's better than nothing. Just when Ting was daydreaming, suddenly, magic fireworks exploded above his head, and at the same time, the Weasley twins' aria-like cheers rang out. Make way for the invincible troll killer. Let our hero make a shining debut. The twins bowed gracefully, one on the left and one on the right, as if opening the curtain of a grand performance. The next moment, the little wizards cheered, and some excitedly followed. Ting, the great hero, troll killer. Ting was immediately surrounded by a group of people. Facing the sudden lively scene in front of him, Ting was numb. At this time, he had only one thought in his mind. This is too social. Everyone in the auditorium, including the professors in the guest seats, were watching him. He felt like an actor on the stage, performing a monkey show in front of everyone. Taking advantage of this time, Ting had already figured out what happened during the questioning. It turned out that after Harry and Ron returned to the dormitory, the big-mouthed Ron exaggerated the matter. Due to the gag order issued by Ting, they did not reveal the existence of Unit 01. But this just made it easier for Ron to play his part. So in his words, the story became that Ting used one spell after another to beat the troll into a pulp, and the scene was almost like slow slicing. Because of the troll incident, the little wizards who could only spend Halloween in the lounge had never heard such exciting news. The news spread from one person to 10, and from 10 to 100, and the more it spread, the more exaggerated it became. Ting was blown up to be a hero of Hogwarts. As for this welcome ceremony, it was of course organized by the Weasley brothers who liked to stir up trouble. The same thing happened not only in Gryffindor. In order to please Ting, Malfoy also told the story after returning to the dormitory, so Slytherin also came to support him spontaneously. Ravenclaw knew nothing about this, but Ting had many supporters in the college, such as Penelope and Jean Chio, who stood up and cheered with everyone as soon as he entered the hall. Penelope was the head girl in the 5th grade and had a strong leadership in the college, and Zhang Qiu immediately became a celebrity in the college since he became the team seeker. With these two people leading the way, Ting himself is also very popular among the junior wizards in Ravenclaw. As a result, even though the little eagles are usually not interested in such things, they cheered this time and regarded Ting as the glory of the entire Ravenclaw. As for Hufflepuffs, the little badgers have always been the kings of Hogwarts. Even if Ting is a Slytherin, they will come up and cheer. He immediately cast a death stare at George and Fred. I am very happy that you can remember Brother Ye's kindness. But Brother Yi doesn't like it when you give Brother Yi such an awkward nickname. It was not easy for Ting to drive away these enthusiastic little wizards. At this time, Ting was already exhausted and thirsty. Then, he saw the twins trying to sneak away. When they were stared at by Ting before, they knew that they were flattering the horse. That's not right. The last time they did this, Ting was still able to happily curse Snape with them. But their little thoughts were immediately seen through by Ting. Offended the abbot and still want to run? Ting rushed forward and patted the twins' shoulders with both hands. The two of them immediately felt a current flowing from their shoulders into their bodies. They felt numb and couldn't stand steadily. They were pressed down on the seat by Ting involuntarily. Ting's gloomy voice sounded from behind. What's wrong, you two? Are you in such a hurry to leave? I haven't had time to thank you for planning this little ceremony for me. It doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. This is what we should do. George didn't dare to look back at all, and said embarrassedly. That's right, we are friends. With our relationship, there is no need to thank you. Fred also said shamelessly. Ting repeated it in a long tone. Yes, I really want to thank you for the surprise. As he said that, Ting took out a teapot and poured a cup of tea for each of the twins. Come on, this is the thank you gift I prepared for you. Thank you for your kindness. When he said this, Ting was particularly friendly, as if the twins had really become his great benefactors. But this attitude made the twins more alert. They took a look at the tea. The color was a mixture of pink and light blue, and it looked very childish. This color combination would be just right if it was placed on a pink and tender little cake, but it would look a little crispy when placed on the tea. This thing won't be poisonous, right? George confirmed carefully. Oh, you really misunderstood me. Ting seemed to have suffered a great injustice. How could I give you a poisonous drink? Don't worry, it must be a good thing, your revenge. I mean the thank you gift, is this the only cup? Fred asked. Of course, I won't give more tea to ordinary people, even Lynette. As he said that, he drove away the cat that tried to come up to drink tea. Hearing this, the twins looked at each other and communicated with their unique tacit eyes. Ting likes Lynette so much. Since this tea is Lynette's favorite drink, it must not be a bad thing. There are probably prank products like hiccup potion in it. If there is only one cup, I admit it. Drink, drink. After confirming each other's eyes, the twins picked up the teacup at the same time. Good brothers, drink it in one gulp. The two drank it all at the same time. The next moment, their faces wrinkled into a ball, and their expressions of disgust were exactly the same. Ugh. How can there be such bitter tea in the world? Ugh. I feel like I'm going to die. Ting, what did you put in the tea? The bitterest potion I've ever seen is not as bitter as this. What Ting poured for them was, of course, sea-dew flower tea, and they naturally showed the same expression as when Ting drank sea-dew flower tea for the first time. This made Ting very happy, and his resentment just now was swept away. Seeing the two brothers retching nonstop, Ting smiled and advised, actually, I didn't lie to you. This tea is really a good thing, used to restore energy. Look, you are full of energy from time to time now. After hearing this, the two felt it according to Ting's words, and suddenly felt that they were full of energy now, and the sleepiness in the morning was swept away without knowing when, and even wanted to do a backflip on the spot. You are telling the truth, it actually has this effect. I thought this was a bitter potion you specially prepared. The two brothers were amazed. You can use sea-dew tea as a special potion. Ting explained. As expected of you, you are good at potions. George praised. Fred remembered another thing. By the way, you helped us improve the formula of the hiccup potion before, and we successfully made a batch of hiccup candies and sold more than 30 galleons privately. George took out 5 gold galleons from his pocket and stuffed them into Ting's hand. You also contributed a lot to this, so we all think that you should be given a share of the dividends. Although it's not as much as selling crucibles, it's also a little bit of our thought. Fred added, no wonder there were always people hiccuping in the lounge in the past few weeks. Ting nodded and accepted it readily. Then he asked casually, so, how is your business recently? It's much worse than in the past few weeks. Fred shook his head. Everyone seems to be tired of playing with hiccup candies. We are now preparing to develop new prank props. Do you have any ideas? George looked at Ting. I have quite a few ideas. Ting nodded. I can basically imitate all the prank props in Zonko's joke shop, but one by one. Ting looked at the two people with burning eyes. Are you satisfied with just selling some homemade joke props in school? What good ideas do you have? George said seriously, we all know your ability, and we support your ideas. Fred also said, since you are going to do business in school, let's do it bigger. Ting waved his hand. What's the big deal about small-scale business? We can simply run a special store, establish our own brand, and develop everything in a formal way in the future. We can even buy our own stalls in Diagon Alley and Hogwarts. Is this your idea? Cool. The twins also became excited after hearing this, and looked eager to try. At this moment, Zhang Qiu's voice came from behind. Hey, Ting, what are you doing hiding here? You hid such a big thing last night and didn't tell me. Ting turned around and found that Zhang, Hermione, and Susan came to find her. They seemed to be still surprised by what Ting did last night, looking at Ting with surprise. Only Hermione had some complaints. The little girl felt that Ting shouldn't do such a dangerous thing. So, Ting repeated the lines he had repeated countless times before to them again, and successfully received a round of admiring cheers. Then, Zhang asked, "So, what were you talking about here just now?" Ting plans to open a small shop in Hogwarts, George said first. Just like you sold crucibles before? Susan asked. Yes, Ting nodded. So, do you want to take a ride together? Of course, no problem. How can we be left out of this kind of thing? The twins responded immediately, as they had had similar ideas for a long time. Count me in. Zhang's face flushed. It really sounded great to make a career in school. I am willing too. Susan was excited, as if she had agreed to marry someone. Hermione opened her mouth and was about to say that doing business in school might violate school rules, but her two companions joined without even thinking about it, and she didn't have time to say it. In fact, she also had an impulse deep in her heart to join in such an interesting thing, but her reason told her that it was wrong to do so. So just like that, she was embarrassed by herself. Ting advised at the right time. In fact, if we want to produce suitable products, we can't avoid using the knowledge we have learned in class or even outside of class. You can completely regard this as social practice, right? His words gave Hermione a reason to convince herself, and the girl nodded. Then I will join reluctantly. But she immediately raised a practical question. But, what are we going to sell? Those graphite crucibles? There are so many businesses we can do. Speaking of this, Ting listed them all, including business props, various potions, homework reference answers, Hogwarts purchasing. If anyone is still not clear about our business scope. Speaking of this, Ting stood up. In a word, we sell things that are allowed by school rules, and we sell more things that are not allowed by school rules. Sell first and talk later, and pay on delivery. Is it clear enough? It's too late today, I can only update twice, and 4 times tomorrow. By the way, in the new month, the little author is here to ask for a wave of monthly tickets. Thank you to Wanja. Episode 70, Wan You Shop. Yes, that's it. So cool, Yi Ling. Hearing this declaration, the twins clapped their hands excitedly, and were very happy to join this plan. Zhang and Susan also showed excited expressions. Hermione still had a little psychological barrier. The little girl raised her hand. I think it's wrong to sell homework. It's not good for our study. Without Ting saying anything, Fred took the initiative to persuade her, but there will always be people who do this secretly, right? Then why not give us a cheap price? Ting had even more reason. I actually do this for the good of poor students. In the past, many people paid a price, but the answers they copied were full of mistakes and omissions, which directly led to the poor students spending money to learn wrong knowledge, which was not worth the loss. Now we have taken action and clearly marked the price. Everyone will definitely get the correct answer after spending money. Isn't this a kind of progress? Finally, he said earnestly, this is also a helpless way. Copying homework is a common phenomenon. When we can't stop it, we can only find a way to coexist with it. Is that so? Hermione always felt that something was wrong with Ting's words, but after hesitating for a long time, she couldn't think of a reason to refute it. Nonsense, Ting's words are the reasons for some beacon countries to reasonably sell banned drugs 30 years later. This reason was carefully concocted by so many political elites in these countries. How could it be refuted by a mere fledgling witch? Since Hermione had no objection, the scope of operation of the store was approved at the initial shareholders' meeting. Then, what can we do? Zhang asked immediately. Design products and provide technical guidance for products, manufacture products through potions and alchemy technology, and promote and sell them. Ting said, there are roughly a few tasks. You can brainstorm on what products to sell. I will complete the specific product design and technical guidance. I don't think everyone has any objections. Everyone shook their heads. Among their group of people, Ting was the best at magic. Even if the twins and Zhang were older than him, they would feel inferior in front of him. You can all participate in the rest of the work. Ting waved his hand. In terms of product manufacturing, simple potion brewing and alchemy manufacturing tasks can be handed over to you. For the complicated parts, you can help me and learn while watching. As for publicity and sales, I am impatient with these tedious tasks, so I will leave it to you. I will at most think about the plan. Of course. Leave it to us, several people responded. It just so happens that I have thought of our first wave of business now. As long as we do it well, our store will definitely be a hit. Ting seemed to have been prepared and said, the Quidditch game will start in November next year. We must seize this opportunity. After Ting reminded them, several people immediately understood. We can sell the team's peripherals and cheering props, Zhang said. We can organize gambling. George also raised his hand. After the two finished speaking, everyone looked at George with strange eyes. How can we organize football betting? This is wrong. Hermione pointed out sharply. Ting did not support this idea either. Ahem, if you want to organize football betting, you must have enough reputation and credibility, and the most important thing is the ability to manipulate the game. Obviously, we don't have the qualifications in this regard yet, so forget it. The twins sneered at Hermione's statement, but they agreed with Ting's suggestion. They heard Ting's subtext. Not this time, wait until next time. Zhangqiu is right, we can sell peripherals and cheering props. Fred put George's hand down, representing his agreement with Zhangqiu's idea. We can make banners, posters, hats representing the team, etc. But this kind of props can be made by ordinary wizards. Susan also made a suggestion. We can cast a spell on them to make them move. Hermione raised her chin. We have to provide something that ordinary people can't do. In addition, we can also provide whistles for cheering, fireworks for celebration, etc. Ting recalled the scenes of football and basketball games and also made suggestions. Speaking of Quidditch and business, everyone was very interested. Several people brainstormed and quickly formulated a business plan. By the way, have you thought of the name of our store? Finally, Zhangqiu suddenly asked. I have thought of it. Ting grinned and said, let's call it Wan You Shop. Wan You Shop? A store with everything? It sounds good, Susan commented. Then it's decided. Ting clapped his hands. Then next, everyone will work hard and strive to make a lot of money. After entering November, the autumn atmosphere gradually deepened and the weather became very cold. The mountains around the school seemed to be covered with gray and white silver yarn, and they looked particularly cold under the ice and snow. The surface of the black lake was like quenched steel, cold and tough, reflecting the faint cold light. Every morning, a thin layer of frost would be covered on the ground. The leaves fluttered down one after another, but the golden oranges and crisp persimmons hanging high on the branches swayed tenaciously in the bleak autumn wind. Occasionally, they would choose a lucky little wizard and hit him on the head. Everyone could always catch a glimpse of Hagrid's busy figure. He was wrapped in a long moleskin coat, wearing rabbit fur gloves, and huge beaver fur boots, busy wrapping hemp rope around the trunks of precious tree species. This hemp rope not only provides anti-freeze protection for the trunks, but also effectively prevents insects from drilling into the bark to spend the winter. As Ting said, with the arrival of this month, the Quidditch season has also been in full swing. The wizards are all very excited, because there are not many entertainment options in Hogwarts. In addition to the Gobstone Club, the Quidditch game is the most anticipated. However, the Gobstone game is a bit niche after all, and the viewing quality is slightly insufficient. In contrast, Quidditch can be said to be a national sport. Even if you are not good at playing and are just a casual player, you can still point out the world and write inspiring words. After dinner, everyone will make a few jokes about the Chudley Cannons, which have always been at the bottom, or scold the national team for never winning the World Cup. Ravenclaw's training is becoming more and more intense, and the players are eager to get off to a good start in the new season. This does not seem to be a difficult task, because their first opponent is Hufflepuff. This is not a difficult battle. However, Ting didn't care no matter how difficult it was, because he was confident that no one could be his opponent, especially after his physical fitness was further enhanced by Eritaki Ichido. For him, the only thing that could affect the result was the opponent's seeker, Cedric Diggory. If the opponent got the golden snitch before he accumulated 150 points, then no matter how good his defense was, it would be useless. Fortunately, Zhangqiu had good talent. Although he was a new seeker, his level was not far behind Cedric. Ting planned to lend her his spare broom, so that he could quickly equalize the gap. On Saturday morning, the hall was full of people, and everyone was discussing the first game that was about to begin. But Ting and others gathered together to promote their business. This game was Gryffindor versus Slytherin, and they had already stockpiled a large number of merchandise and props related to the game, including red and green hats, banners, whistles, cheering sticks, fireworks, etc. According to the experience learned from Zhangqiu and the twins, among the products prepared by Ting, the props supporting Gryffindor are twice as many as those supporting Slytherin. Little snakes are often hostile in the college, but in contrast, the most expensive and luxurious products are mostly from Slytherin. After all, when it comes to pocket money, little snakes are always more generous. Zhangqiu took on the responsibility of publicity. She has a good foundation in art and is suitable for this. She took out the small she designed. It was a stack of beautifully designed and colorful advertising paper, on which it was written in dazzling golden characters. Wan You Shop, you can buy anything you want. Below is a list of products and the always very provocative advertising slogans. Do you want to cheer for the team you support? Do you want to stand out from the crowd? Act quickly, because your opponent has already taken the lead. Hermione and Susan were stunned. This was the first time he saw the content of the. It was simply naked provocation. Such a hardcore and straightforward advertising slogan was obviously not from Zhangqiu. Ting looked at their reactions and couldn't help laughing, explaining, "Don't worry, this kind of advertising is okay. This is the effect we want. We want to make a name for ourselves, And the advertising slogans must be novel and interesting to attract people. Think about it, which Gryffindor student is willing to lose to Slytherin? And how can a Slytherin student be willing to admit in front of Gryffindor? After checking the advertising slogans, they still have to distribute flyers to each college. The twins are responsible for Gryffindor, and Zhang Qiu is responsible for Ravenclaw. Susan of course went to Hufflepuff, and Hermione wanted to go with her. In Gryffindor, Hermione was ostracized and didn't have many friends, but with the help of Ting, she was welcomed by some Hufflepuffs and Ravenclaws. Ting took Lynette to challenge Slytherin. Among them, only Ting had some connections in Slytherin. Slytherin valued bloodline, but was also realistic enough. Therefore, after Ting's one-on-many counterattack without injury, no one in Slytherin dared to complain about him, but instead they were in awe of this muggle-born wizard. Sure enough, when seeing Ting coming to sell, Malfoy immediately bought a lot of banners, whistles, and fireworks. However, the witches in Slytherin were the most interested in the Wan You Shop, or more accurately, in Ting. Seeing someone take the flyer, Ting smiled professionally. Our Wan You Shop is officially open. This is our product list. If you are interested, you can order it directly. Several witches gathered around, excitedly flipping through the S and talking about it. But their eyes stayed more on Ting, and they seemed to be more interested in him. Ting, are you short of money? A girl with golden curly hair asked in a teasing tone. She shook her big waves lightly, and inadvertently, the golden hairpin on her head was exposed. Being able to wear such luxurious jewelry at this age, it is obvious that this girl comes from an extraordinary family. She winked at Ting playfully and shook the diamond bracelet on her wrist. My name is Flora Carlo. If you are willing to date me, I can. It was obvious what she was hinting at. Ting certainly understood what she meant. He smiled helplessly and shook his head, saying, I'm not short of money. Making these gadgets is more out of interest, and it can also improve my magic skills. Of course, this is just Ting's excuse. In fact, all his research requires a lot of money. Whether it is precious potion materials or rare elements required for alchemy, each one is expensive. Not to mention the flower bud that consumes 10 bottles of nutrient solution every day. However, he has not given up trying yet. Hearing Ting's response, Flora was obviously disappointed. At this time, another girl who looked similar to Flora came over and looked at Ting curiously. You says you can buy anything you want, so do you sell anything else besides Quidditch props? Of course, Ting responded immediately and enthusiastically. Our store is called Wan You Shop, so no matter what you want, as long as you order it, we will do our best to satisfy it. Can you make aphrodisiac? The girl asked curiously. Ting was slightly stunned, as if he did not expect the other party to make such a request. But he quickly regained his composure and smiled confidently. Of course, this is not a difficult task for me. Oh? The girl was obviously very interested in this answer. You are just a freshman, can you really make this kind of potion? My strength speaks for itself, Mississippi. Ting kept smiling. Not everyone can make Professor Snape speechless in class. Ting pulled out the old bat as a stepping stone again. On the teacher's table, Snape couldn't help but make a platform. But, Ting changed the subject and reminded at the right time, aphrodisiac is a high-level potion that is expensive. I'm not short of money. The girl waved her hand generously. I want one too. Flora also raised her hand, and the heat in her eyes became more intense. Oh? Are you interested too? Ting snapped his fingers, and a feather pen with golden ripples appeared out of thin air beside him, automatically recording the order on a piece of parchment. A beautiful lady like you, in fact, with your charm, most of the students in Hogwarts may find it difficult to resist. But... He paused and showed a more charming smile. Customer requirements are our service tenet. This expression, he was still imitating the sign poster of Gilderoy Lockhart that he saw in Flourish and Blots. Sure enough, the girl was dazzled by Ting and smiled foolishly. Soon, with Ting's excellent eloquence and unique charm, he not only successfully sold a large number of cheering props, but also negotiated several big deals. After careful calculation, although the cheering props for the Quidditch game only sold dozens of galleons, the income from potions was as high as hundreds of galleons. Sure enough, it is faster to make money with these rich women.